Mike's live.
Okay. We're going to bring this meeting to order. Everyone please rise and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Mr. McCullough, can we get a roll call vote? Roll call, please.
Mr. Seminaro. Mrs. Hamill.
Here.
Mr. Kurtz. Here. Mr. McCullough. Here. Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Potts. Here. Mr. Shaheen. Here. Mr. Wolf. Here. And Mr. Basil.
Here. Okay, under announcements, are there any agenda edits to the voting meeting?
Just one on the resolution, which I'll mention in a few minutes.
Okay. Seeing none, also I'm going to make an announcement to the public. We have an executive session scheduled for after this meeting to discuss personnel. Having said that, are there any public comments on the special voting meeting, which will discuss the closure of APC, Amity Primary Center? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on.
Okay, Mr. Basil, thank you. And for the members of the public here, before we make the motion as presented, I'd like to just make a few comments. First of all, that the resolution for the closure of APC has been prepared by the solicitor and has been provided to the board and is now ready for your vote. We've met all the statutory requirements as required under the law to take this vote. I just want to make one note. We are making an adjustment to the section of the resolution that references an approximate savings of $600,000, which was one of the original amounts that we estimated, to now a savings of approximately $300,000, just under that. In drawing up the resolution, Mr. Subers had used that original figure that was stated, and that was actually the original figure in the original transcript. That figure has changed since the original hearing because we modified the savings projection because professional staff reductions that were originally counted in APC have now been accounted for through staff demotions and curtailments. So the money hasn't been lost per se, it's just been moved to a different pot. So the $300K in savings now comes from a reduction in one nurse that we would no longer need, 2 secretaries, 1 administrator, 1 custodian, and about $45,000 in operational savings costs that was in the original presentation as well. The only other modification from the original presentation, which was also shared at the Facilities Committee last week, which is also reflected in the resolution, is that we are recommending that all grades from APC be placed at AIC, making AIC a K-5 rather than a 1-5 building. If you remember, that was with the original hearing. That was the only real feedback that we got in a couple emails about keeping everyone together. So we are making that recommendation as you vote. So rather than breaking out the kindergarten to MEC, AIC would become a K-5 building, which, if you approve this, would make all 3 of our elementary campuses K-5 and consistent across the district. So I'll open it up. Beyond that, those are really the sum of my comments at this point. There's a lot of documentation available for this that's been sitting for a long time now. So if there's any further comments.
Any questions or comments by board members?
Why would we reduce it from 300 to 600 if they were in the curtailments, and remove from the curtailments and make it part of the closure? It would save us from having to file the curtailment paperwork.
The reason for that is that we really wouldn't, the positions that we're saying are coming as curtailments would have happened in spite of APC closing, so I didn't think it was fair to count them in that bucket.
I think the largest one out of that group was the retirement of a librarian.
Okay, so they're not a curtailment per se, they're elsewhere in the budget, correct?
Correct.
So are there any of them that are within the delta between the 300 to 600 that are actually going to be voted on as curtailments?
I don't think so, but
As demotions, I believe.
Other than the demotions?
As demotions, I don't believe that they're necessarily the curtailments.
And I would add, just for the benefit of the difference in that number, whether that number had originally been 300 or 600, I still believe this is the path to take, given the decrease that we have had in enrollment. Any savings that we get is great. I think also, though, making the most efficient use of our facilities is paramount to this recommendation as well.
I'm fine. I mean, it's
No, I just wanted to point that out.
Take out one bucket, put in another bucket, and just for clarity, I just wanted to make sure that to save us all the extra paperwork that we need to file, a copy of the understanding.
Any other questions? Board members? Okay. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
I actually need a motion. Make a motion.
Oh, thought we had a motion. My fault. Go ahead.
Make a motion for the resolution as outlined by the solicitor.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz? Yes. Mr. McCullough? Yes. Mr. Potts?
Yes.
Mr. Shaheen?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Basil?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, we will convene into our regular committee of the whole meeting.
May I make further comment regarding
Yes.
APC? Again, now that this vote has become official, I just wanted to alert the public that the administration has been working behind the scenes to come up with some plans to chart a future for the building in terms of use, and hope that we might be able to secure some revenue in the form of leases and things like that. Since those things are under negotiation, I don't really feel it would be in the best interest of those negotiations at this point to bring forward any further information. But as that information comes forward, we will certainly share it with the public. But we're hopeful that we can use that building as much as we possibly can during the time that it may be closed. So beyond that, I would also like to say that given the savings that we indicated, that certainly, I think, needs to become part of our budget conversations going forward once we get to that point on the agenda.
Okay.
So that concludes my comments on that. And thank you, Board. Again, it's not something that it's just a sign of the times. Again, with enrollment down, it's never a good thing to have to close a building. But again, we believe that administratively we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we're making the most efficient use of the space that we have. So thank you.
Well, just again, you may have outlined this. What is the process of reactivating the building if time is needed moving forward? I know we talked about classifying a tenant, but making sure that that tenant knew that potentially down the road with notice we would reactivate that building. Because the last thing we want to do is all of a sudden have a population boom, things loosen up, looking at not having enough room in the existing buildings again. My
understanding of it is, and I'll get further clarification from when Mr. Subers is here, but actually what we have to do now with your vote is there's a school configuration process that we have to, and it's an administrative thing that we do. The board doesn't have to take action. So we'll reconfigure the school, take APC off the books, and we'll put AIC down as a K-5 building, because for testing purposes, PSSA, AYP accountability, we have to register AIC as kind of a new school with the state, because it's currently a 3-5 building. So that has to change now with the state. So I would imagine the reverse of that process would take place if we open it. We would reconfigure it, and we would have the right just to open it. We don't have to hold the hearing to reopen the building.
Yeah, I don't recall any special hearings that we had when we opened MEC. Yeah.
If there's a time frame that needs to be done, or I don't want us to handcuff ourselves if all of a sudden we all hope things loosen up and start moving forward.
Well, I'm sorry.
We don't want to find ourselves in a position where we got to have the building and we can't get the building for a year and a half or something.
Well, as we certainly negotiate with any partners, we will certainly be bringing that information to the board. It's not our intent to recommend, at least from what we found so far, any long-term leases with anybody.
Public opinion, 90 days before you can do something.
No, we're okay with that. The only constrictions we would put on ourselves were those that we would put on ourselves in a lease.
Any other questions or comments?
Will there be potential of renaming the building, as we discussed?
That's renaming of buildings would fall into the providence of the board.
What would you rename it to?
Well, I guess we were discussing that facilities, possibly renaming that to Amity Elementary, something in that.
Yeah, I would recommend. I thought you were talking something larger than that. I think we should probably, as we go through the school configuration process, intermediate has a signification of the middle grades. So given that our other buildings are K to 5, we should probably, and I'll discuss that with Brian Sewers as well.
So you're talking about changing the name of AIC?
To AEC would be Amity Elementary Center.
Seems to make sense.
Go with the nomenclature.
I have to check that. I don't know what costs would be associated with that.
Changing everything, letterhead, websites.
Understood. Well, there's a big intermediate sign inside. Yes, there's
marquees in the building.
Well, we'll start researching that now that we have your approval to go forward. It's got to be 3.
Yeah, that's much.
Well,
not worth changing it. Yeah.
Just asking you now.
Okay, that's all I have on APC. Again, thank you.
Okay, having said that, we're moving on to the Committee of the Whole regular meeting. Are there any public comments on anything on the agenda for the Committee of the Whole? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Basil. In anticipation of some more conversation toward the end of this evening, I've shortened my Superintendent's report tonight to a brief report on some school activities. Last Friday, the high school held its annual prom at the Crown Plaza in Wyomissing, and from all reports from the high school administration, all went well with the event. Our spring sports regular season has ended, and happy to say our boys volleyball team and our girls softball teams are both involved in postseason competition, I believe. They compete tomorrow night, and obviously with the track season, many of our female and male track athletes are also involved in district level competition as well, so we'll keep you posted on their successes as we go through the rest of the spring. So that concludes my report.
Okay. Any comment from the board?
I can tell you that I've heard nothing but good comments about this year's prom. There were a lot of better than last year, much more enjoyable.
I don't know if this is the first time, but it was held up in Reading up at the Crown Royal, so shorter ride for the students than normal.
Sometime, but they didn't get it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Mr. Hankel, any comments? I know you were there. Would you like to share anything for the board and the public?
No, I mean, it was just a great time by all. It really was. It was packed. And the behavior was outstanding.
Always good to hear. Thank you. Okay, that's it.
Any comments from the public? The board update? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to curriculum and instruction.
We held our meeting, probably the last meeting of the year, on May 1st. Concentrated on 2 areas. We had guidance counselor come and give us something like the year in the life of a guidance counselor. Found that there were, at least in her job, there was a number of duties that a guidance counselor was given that Mrs. Torsia took note of and probably should not be assigned to guidance counselors, more administrative work. And they're going to work to streamline that a little bit. I believe they provided the board that PowerPoint. There were some questions. I got answered. If not, if the board didn't get it, we can make that PowerPoint available. But a lot more than what at least I had thought a guidance counselor was assigned to do on a daily or a weekly basis. So that was interesting. We also had a presentation and some handouts about the library. Very surprised to find out that the circulation and the visitation of the library has not dwindled over the years, that it's still the place to go to get research materials and some of that stuff. So the online stuff, we talk about everybody using the online. A lot of teachers are still requiring a primary source other than internet for some papers, so the library is still the place to go. And we talked about the ability to be able to print. Not everybody has printers at home, not everybody has computers at home. It's just, we like to believe everybody knows it's just not there, so they're being used to print. It's also being the work, a place to go to just to do some quiet time homework and some other stuff. So that was eye-opening on some of what's going on there. I would have thought that over a period of time with the use of electronics and stuff, that the visitations to the library would be dwindling. And that was not the case. What we did find when we got into some open conversations, and I did inform Dr. Hutch, this isn't a shock, but stop is we found that the special teachers that teach the specials in math, the art, gym, library, whatever we call specials, are being pulled in some buildings to fill in as substitute teachers and shutting down that special at the time. And that's not what we should be using our specialist teachers. The arts, the gym, the librarians should not be used as substitute teachers. You're just sacrificing one program for another, music, the same thing. So Mrs. Torsion is going to look into that. In fact, our meeting was Wednesday, and I believe it was Thursday or Friday after getting another building. So
it was during preparation time, though, that the staff member was not pulled from instructing students.
So we need to make sure that.
We'll follow up on that.
Okay. Other than that, we're looking to, back in next September to start up again with Mr. Henkel's presentation on some block scheduling alternatives and how that's going to look, how that would look after he gets the scheduling consolidated and concrete in place for next year.
Any questions from board members?
Would it be possible to get some hard data on the number of students going to the library?
Yes, I have that in hard copy.
Can you forward that?
I'm going to have to get it scanned and sent to you.
So the special teachers just there for an hour, or are they there?
There were several being pulled for the entire day.
Instead of calling out for substitute. Why would they try to find a substitute for the day? Is it just easier to grab another teacher?
Again, in at least the one situation that was cited, the teacher was also, the special teacher was also certified in that discipline, so they felt it was easier just to pull her in and call out. So, but it's being stopped.
Any other questions? Seeing none, any public comment or questions? I think you can present them up here.
Okay, go get them.
We want to thank the DBEA for making that donation to the library. I see here there's the high school, middle school, MEC, AIC, and BEC, a book for each. So thank you. Once you see these, you guys go pass them around. Okay, any other public comment? Good.
I'm not going to yell tonight.
Could you state your name?
Tina Jolivet of 313 Woodbridge Lane.
Okay.
When I hear you all talking about material, reading, literature, whatever, with the libraries, I said it here before, like when my daughter was in this building, my daughter had been volunteering in the library since she was in second grade at the Boone Area Library. Every time she had a project or book report, there was never a book here that she needed. I still today will take her to the library or she goes online when she needs books. You just can't find them, or it's always locked. The library here is beautiful when you walk by it, but there's never what you consider as closed. And, I don't know what you're going to do here or closing it part-time or whatever. But I had another issue when my daughter got to the high school, and it was just the fact that her book bag was so heavy, and she has scoliosis. she has to download the whole book. Well, that's like telling me no, because the book, if you download it, it costs several $100s for one book. And the thing that amazes me is that we don't take advantage of all of this technology that we have at our fingertips, things that kids can use right here in school. Even when we had, the indoor competition and kids came in from other school districts, a parent came over and asked us, what is your school's password? We're trying to get on. Other schools do it. You can get on the internet in the class. I mean, you all can find ways to save money just by letting kids use the technology that they have every day walking around in their pocket. You probably can find very few kids that don't have a cell phone on them. But I want it to be something that you all think about, because these kids have technology. What about making it that they can use the internet from wherever they are in that building? And I know you all worry about security issues, but if other schools are doing it, show that you are moving forward in the future. Catch up with the other school districts. Find out how it's working in their schools, but they have to come home to, pull things up or whatever that they can't do in school. If they're sitting in the classroom and they have the technology, why can't they have access to it on the internet or pull up a book? It may save you a little bit of money. Just something I want you all to think about.
Thank you. It's a good suggestion. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, can we move on to buildings and grounds?
I'll start here. Last Monday, as I said, even though we've already voted, I showed up for a brief part of the meeting. I was feeling a little ill that evening, but I did manage to get there to talk about the APC, but then they had an agenda beyond that, so I'm going to turn it over to Scott for a report on Mr. Potts on the rest of that evening.
Thank you, Dr. Ono. We covered a vast array of topics at the meeting last Monday night. Mr. Smith did cover as far as the AIC. We'll be starting roof coating. All that will be kept in-house at a minimal cost. Bids were out for snow plowing, and that went to Robert Bear & Son for a 3-year contract. Disposal went to Interstate Advanced. That's a combined track removal. Mr. Smith is also looking into, he has 2 old floor machines. He's working on right now, going out for bids on that, so that will be later on. Obviously, we covered APC closure. That was handled tonight. As far as high school banners, several months ago, Mr. Hankel came to me and I gave his blessing, my blessing, to have banners donated. And I believe that was for Mr. Hankel, if you can sort of raise the flag on that. They were donated, of course, at no cost to the district. The name of that was the National Guard. You can come up to the podium, please. But meanwhile, we needed to get some hardware to hang these banners. I don't know if they're all, we're working on that right now. They're very nice. They're going to be outside on some of the light poles and in some of the gym, I believe.
Right. What happened was earlier in the year, the National Guard came to us and said, what can we do for you? They've done so much for us. Lanyards and pens and things that you just give out to kids, cups and stuff like that. And they said, we can make banners. And I'm like, the antennas went, really? The only thing you have to get an agreement on is that the National Guard logo is on the back. So I called you up right away and gave the blessing, and he gave us a 5-foot by 20-foot banner that Mrs. Schreiner designed. It's hanging in the gym right now. Beautiful. Welcome to Gainesville High School, home of Blazer, the BB logo, and the National Guard symbol is really not a cruise, it's part of the banner. And then if you notice in other schools, as you go in the driveways, you have the banners flying, things like that. So they printed up vertical ones, 3 feet by 5 feet. Same thing, welcome to Gainesville High School, home of Blazers, and working with you and Ken Smith. They should be up by the end of the weekend. And they gave us 8. Absolutely no charge, and they said next year if you need more, come on back. That'd be lovely.
Hopefully we can have them on every light bulb.
Yeah, so we're going to start making it. We set it right in front of the school and we'll work our way out.
Right. Okay. Thank you. On from there, we went to, with Birdsboro Elementary, they're soon soon going to be discontinuing the T12 ballast for the lighting. Going to go to T8 and T5. With that, Mr. Smith has some funds available to start that retrofit, and that will be kept in-house also. He has some from the scrap of the Birdsburg chillers last year. He was able to get $14,000 in scrap, which that was in that's in the line item right now. We have also from the Act 129 energy incentive, we have $6,000. So with that, he needs to take out of which he has allocated savings from his budget of $15,000 for that total cost of $35,000. And then we went on to one of the items that we went into 4 years ago was looking for wireless tabletop microphones. And there were several options which the board couldn't come back with their blessing on due to the fact that the costs were still fairly high. The complete system, which is a wireless system with 10 mics, was $12,000. The wireless adaptive with the present equipment was $67.84, and a wired system with 12 mics for $56.54, and that would be just fixed here in this auditorium. I just feel as though to be financially responsible as we're doing shifting from closing buildings and trying to find resources from outside the district, I don't think it's something we need to really spend right now. So the other item that we talked about with obviously going into APC closure was bringing some outsourcing of funds in for possibly leasing with a called River Rock Academy, which they have alternative education, and that would be 8 through 12. Obviously, at this point, we're looking at, as far as any of the equipment in the cafeteria right now is going to be moved to supplement some used equipment that we no longer have any life left, certainly in Birdsburg Elementary. We are also looking into, with River Rocks Academy, there's no true numbers yet, but we're still working on that. They're looking at around, I believe, 80 to 100 students in that building. The custodial cleaning would all be done by staff, their staff, with no cost to the district. River Rocks have been in the education business for 10 years. Right now, I believe they're in Lancaster County. They're looking to pool students from at least 4 districts in the area. And obviously, as far as cafeteria, they would use the serving line, but all the food would be prepped through Sodexo here at the middle school, and their staff would then distribute it once it was transported over to APC. The only staff labor would be from here to load it in the vans. Let's see. And I believe there was one thing that the advisory committee, Mrs. Reno, was present for the first meeting. One thing she did bring up, which is always something to look at, is early intervention program, which is a 3 to 5 year old students. There's 10 per class, 3 to 4 classrooms. Right now, I believe BCIU is possibly running something like that, which obviously we got to get all our ducks in a row. I think obviously there's revenue out there to bring in.
We are looking at that as well.
And hopefully with years to come, maybe administration after the lease of 2014 is up.
Correct.
Moving in there also. So I think you're going to see the fund slowly appearing where these cost savings will multiply. And with that, if there's any questions.
Again, I just want to reiterate with any of the people that we're talking to as far as potential leasing, we have not entered any agreements or anything with anyone yet. Everything's very preliminary.
Any questions from board members? Okay, seeing none. Any questions or comments from the public?
I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago, your football team put in, they purchased a wireless speaker system to communicate. Maybe contact one of them and, you know, maybe what we need to do is add a few more microphones.
One thing I wanted to bring up also is presently right here in the auditorium we do have wireless headsets. I mean, that's always an option. And I don't know, Mr. Smith, can you tell me how many we have back here?
We have for everybody.
I mean, that's, I think...
It's a preference.
I mean, it's, you know, obviously we're not up here singing, but obviously they're there for our disposal.
If we have one, why would you consider purchasing 12
Well, it was brought up at a recent meeting about if a person doesn't want to pick up the microphone, well, so be it, but there are stands. So obviously that was mentioned if we followed through like we did 4 years ago.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
If no board members have objections to using the lapel microphones, I think we should do that in the future for the public to be better able to hear what goes on at the discussion table.
It's always an option.
I think we should begin doing that.
If a board member elects to do so.
What?
If a board member elects to wear one.
Obviously, if a board member chooses not to wear one, it would kind of be assumed that everybody is aligned wearing one. But if they objected to say that, they could get a regular microphone.
Okay. Any other comments from board members? Any other comments from the public on the facilities? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to finance.
There are 6 routine approvals, with items D, E, and F being approvals that appear annually for our student interscholastic sports insurance policy, voluntary student accident coverage, student's choice, family's choice, and approval for annual bids. Mrs. Penz, anything to add to those items?
Not unless there's questions.
Does our insurance carrier go out and bid the sports policy, or is ACE really the only one out there?
Actually, there's another company, AMA, that we went out to, or I'm sorry, AG Administrators, and they actually came in, let me back up. The original plan that we have is a AAA plan. I'm recommending going to a AA plan. I had sent the board the spreadsheet with some of the differences. Basically, there's just a few differences. Instead of pretty much letting the benefit be usual and reasonable, there are some caps for x-rays now and labs. Emergency room outpatient maximum intensive care. Maximum shall not exceed 7 days, and that's really the nuts and bolts of the difference. And the reason I did that is in exploring the AAA plan, our current provider gave us a price of $11,615 for next year, which is a 15% increase, and it's well over what I had projected for the budget. So we did go out to another company, which is AG Administrators. They actually came in at $12,600, and they do not provide the extra waiver that we get for extracurricular activities, for overnight trips, and so forth, which we do get with the ACE. The AA plan that I'm recommending with, like I said, a few caps there, is actually $10,454, which is about $354 more than the premium we're paying for this year.
Okay. Any other questions from board members on finance? Okay, seeing none, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, move on to personnel.
Under personnel, you have your normal, have a few retirements listed, both professional and classified, number of leaves. That will expand as time goes on. Field trip chaperones are listed there. That's why that lengthy list is there for you. At the end are the election of school board treasurer, which would need to be done next week. And also there were some questions about the school board secretary, and we did follow through with you with a legal opinion from Brian Subers to make sure that we are in fact following the school code as it relates to the renewal of the board secretary's term, and I believe we are where we need to be with that position. So unless there are any questions, that is all I have under personnel.
Are there any questions or comments from board members? Okay, seeing none, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, moving on to programs.
Under programs, you have a number of routine approvals. Again, I would like to point out A summer school program we always put on for approval. Again, that's self-sustaining. Item F is a new issue. The Department of Education, there's a motion which you would vote next week to allow me as superintendent to use the electronic. I'm going to a lot of electronic signatures now. So for me to process, for an electronic signature to process sign-offs on e-grants and other contracts and paperwork with PDE that require my signature as superintendent. The proposed resolution that was provided to you has been reviewed by Brian Subers, and he's indicated hasn't indicated any legal issues with it. And finally, the item G, every year we have to provide an application for any alternative education placements that we may have. It used to be a grant, but they took away the funding feature of it, so now we just have to submit paperwork in order to place students. So that concludes the program report. And again, just want to note, you have our second month with the new student transportation and placement data report there.
All right. Any questions from board members? Okay, seeing none, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, move on to policy. Under policy, the policy committee, you see, has been very busy. Unless there are any questions, you have the first section, our second readings, which would be voted for and then made official for those revisions. The first reading and acknowledgments of A through J are there. They are being reviewed by Mr. Subers. And this third set, A through G, are just, they've been reviewed with no need for changes. And we just had a policy committee review meeting the other night, which was rather busy again. We've now gotten into the personnel sections of our policy review, and they're rather detailed and tedious as many of the other policies. Some of that information will be coming forward in the month of June. So, I don't know, Mr. Seminaro is chair. Do you have anything to add to policy?
No, that's fine.
Okay, any questions or comments from board members about policy and policies that are in front of you?
We're getting into some touchy ones. Mr. Subers had review.
He gets all of them, yes.
And they're a point of a lot of discussion during our meetings. Yeah.
I can only tell you our policy meetings are rather lengthy meetings. There's a lot to cover. They go well up to almost 10 o'clock, starting at 7.
I have a concern about the first reading for the extracurricular activities, specifically in the fee section under 5, that if the activity is self-supported through their own money, that they're not subject to the activity fee. Well, we already have 4 that I could find groups that already meet that. So they, it's the cheerleaders in both the middle school and the high school. They're paying a $150 activity fee, but in the case of one of their cases, the football cheerleaders, the cost for their program is only $114. So I would say, when we look at this, these people could come back at any point and say, hey, why should I pay $150 for whatever the rate structure is going forward when my activity is already self-funded? And if the fees are changed in the structure that were being discussed in the revenue enhancement, a lot of these programs will be quote-unquote self-funded just by their activity fee. So I'm just throwing that out there as a concern. The other concern I had is with number 7. We had heard, whether it's accurate or not, rumors that if the rate structure went into effect similar to what was being discussed in revenue enhancement for extracurricular activities, that there would be an effort to sign up for the free and reduced lunch program, and that would automatically gain them free activity. And since there's no check and balance, we can't ask somebody for what their status is financially in order to qualify, but we can, according to Mr. Subers, ask for qualification for extracurriculars. So I think there should be a disconnect between this policy from the free and reduced lunch program and extracurriculars. And right now, that's specifically listed in there as free and reduced. consideration. It shouldn't be, in my opinion.
I would concur with that. I think on the 2 points that you raised, I think the first one was the activity fees as first conceived in the policy written were set up in this fashion to help subsidize the overall cost of the program. So I think what you're not seeing taken into consideration with the individual costs of the programs is we do have an overhead expense, which is our athletic facilitator, the secretary, and, the trainer, and all those other things, which is a couple $100,000, and that's not being taken into consideration in the individual costs of the individual sports. So, if you are going to look at activity fees for each individual activity and say, okay, well, based on the number of students, this is either self-funded or not funded, we have to add that overhead cost into the equation. And I don't know whether you do that by sport or you do it by student, or that's a whole other discussion, I think, for revenue enhancement to consider. I think the only reason why the policy is as it is, and we may have to go back and look at it, is because no other recommendation had come forward yet from REC to change the current rate structure or how it's applied. But I would agree with you with the free and reduced lunch. With some of the information I've seen recently, there's a lot of people that are participating in activities that have that designation, free and or reduced. And I would agree that it probably does need to be looked at differently. People need to qualify some other way for relief from an activity fee than just signing up for the free and reduced lunch program. I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
Just so we don't make the same mistake that happened before, where we laid out this policy and we were looking at this as a dynamic model, and people weren't going to change their behavior based on something that's changed. If you pay taxes that has an impact, people are going to change their behavior. I'm not saying there's something wrong. I'm just saying there could be a potential problem with, when it says that it's self-funded. Well, self-funded, even if you took a portion of whatever the administrator's functions are, and you spread that over the number of students that participate, still there would be a number of groups that could come back to the board and say, hey, I should have to pay $200 because I had $125. That's where our activity is self-funded, and then we start getting into the budget projections that we're assuming that we're going to get. We're not going to get there.
Yeah. Well, then at that point there, you raise the activity fee of the other. If you're going to look at it that way and say, if you're going to do an activity fee of $125, and those that are self-funded, say we only need $75 a student to be 100%, and then that's going to be taken into consideration by the REC because that's going to change the whole dynamics of the calculation for the remainder of the club. So,
and a more expensive sport would have to be charged more, theoretically.
Was that the intent of lining out the specific fees and not taking it away, but so that they could be adjusted on an ongoing basis?
Yes. So essentially, we were thinking the policy essentially is going to be static because these things only get looked at once every 10 or 12 years, whereas the fees may change annually. So as opposed to building them into the policy and having to revise the policy every single year, you're just going to reference whatever the activity fees are as decided by the board, and then on an annual basis the board decides what the fees are, but the policy remains intact. That was the idea for striking out the individual fees from the policy.
I agree with Mike. I think we need to review it again. I was actually reading certain parts of it last night, this morning, and I think we need to go back and redefine some of the parts that show that if you're self-funded, then you are exempt from the activity fee.
Well, you got to identify what self-funded is.
Right. There's certain issues that we just have to go through. Well, even like lacrosse. Lacrosse is a Daniel Boone sport, and hockey is a Daniel Boone sport, but they don't actually. They're club sports, even though they're in Daniel Boone. Are they really self-funded? If that's the case, do they have to pay an activity fee? Are they currently paying an activity fee? I think we need to redefine some of that.
Well, given that this is a first reading, we can put it on your agenda for Wednesday night.
On Wednesday?
Sure. Let's add it to the discussion for the REC Wednesday night.
Right. So we need to look at.
Take a second look at it.
Yeah, I think we do.
Thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, any questions or comments from the public?
Shane Cockrell, 830 Banner County. Why are there any sports being funded 100% by parents? I mean, isn't that unfair to those students that would have to fund 100% of their program while their parents are still paying taxes?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase your question again, Shane? I missed the first part.
Okay. If the school district is handing out money to these sports, why are there some sports that the school district is saying we're not going to fund? We only have enough money to fund.
No, we fund, just so you understand, we fund 100% of the sports that are part of the school district's program. There are certain sports like tennis, hockey, swimming, and lacrosse that are club sports. They're run by the Amity Athletic Club, not by the school district. There are no fees being collected for those sports by the school district.
So they're not paying an activity fee?
I don't know what they're paying Amity Athletics, but they're not paying an activity fee to the school for those sports.
Okay. Okay, I thought what Mr. Wolf was saying, that these clubs would start being charged an activity fee.
No, and not so long as they're controlled by the Amity Athletic Club. I would imagine if this school, for whatever reason, would bring those activities under its umbrella, then at that point in time, they would be charged an activity fee. But they are not part of the school.
So the cheerleaders that are funding their sport?
I think that's, you got to be careful about how you phrase that, because what's going on is we have a $680,000 extracurricular budget. Right. We only collect about $140,000 in activity fees. So our sports program and activity program is not 100% funded by any stretch of the imagination. We're only subsidizing a third of that cost, if that, not even a third.
But what I'm saying is you're covering 100% for certain.
No, so what you have to understand is there's the Revenue Enhancement Committee has been looking into the activity fee structure for both clubs and sports, okay? And as part of that analysis, we looked at what were the costs for each individual sport, okay, overall, or activity, whether it's a club or it's a sport or it's band, and then what was it cost per student, okay? And if you look at that spreadsheet, you could see how that broke down. But absent out of those calculations were all of our other overhead costs that are part of that overall program. Okay? So it's not really an issue of self-funding. Remember, the first step here with the activity fee when it was first introduced to the school district was to help subsidize the entire program. We knew at the time, and we, as part of you, I think you sat in the meetings for the activity fees. We had several of them. There was a joint task force between parents, teachers, board members, the athletic director, administrators. Everybody was involved. And we looked at a per sport or per activity menu in terms of costs, which would be you take the total costs of that activity, you add in overhead, you divide it by the number of students, and that's the cost for that particular activity. Some of those costs were like several $100s, $400, $500 for certain activities. Others were a lot less. And that fee structure was rejected out of hand by the committee at the time because they wanted something simple. One flat fee for all sports, okay? And a second flat fee for a second sport and one flat fee for as many clubs as you want to do. That was, they felt, to be the easiest thing for the administration to manage, for parents to understand, for students to understand. And that's the fee structure that we put in place. It has nothing to do, the fee structure that we currently have has nothing to do with the underlying costs of those individual programs.
Okay, but I guess my point, the question I'm asking is, why, you brought up the cheerleaders, why are they paying anything out of pocket?
Why are they? Because there's a cost to the program.
Okay, well then so all the other sports.
Wait. Can I clarify something? I don't think the cheerleaders are paying for their 100% of their own fees. They have additional costs when you join cheerleading. that's what I think.
They're raising money for that. Other organizations are raising money for invitationals, which are not part of the curriculum.
We still pay for cheerleading.
Track, wrestling. If they don't raise the money for these extra events, they don't go. That's where the fundraisers are.
Mr. Sheen, we still pay for cheerleading.
We still pay for cheerleading. We still pay for wrestling. We still pay for track. We still pay for cross country. But if they want to go to an invitational, which is where they get seen, they get more competition, better competition, or they have to pay to go to those. And that's where the MAC Club raises money for the wrestlers. That's where the track and cross country people do the car washes and whatever fundraisers they do. And the cheerleaders do their.
No, excuse me.
My only point was that there's in this policy, it says that any organization that is self-funded is exempt from the fee. And as we looked at the cost in the REC, then you could see how much the stipend was, how much the teasers are, and the other costs associated with that program, minus the overall. There's a piece of that overall number of and everyone else involved, and a piece of that has to be attributed to that activity also. However, it's really close, and if we start raising the activity fees, what's the definition of self-funded at that point? I think it could be something we need to look at. That's the only reason I raised the issue.
Okay.
The other thing about cheerleading is, and I think the initial costs are they have to buy certain sneakers, they have to buy certain other things to be on the team. That's where that's not provided by the school, but they're not self-funding their program. The school pays for everything else, meaning the coaches, transportation, and everything else.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? On policy. This is on policy, yep. So if you got something to say about one of the policies that we're talking about here.
I don't know, maybe myself. I didn't really want to interject, but I had some questions. I'm Tara from 121st Street. It had been brought to my attention in the last couple of days. So part of my hearing, so it's hard work today. It was right last minute that I was told that I could be here for this. So, but I actually had some questions regarding the fourth reading program.
Okay, this probably isn't the time for that. We'll get to that in about 45 seconds, maybe.
Should I just stay put?
Yeah, if you can just wait till we get through policy. Well, wait a minute. Budget. Yeah, we got transportation, which is nothing. Then old business, we start talking about the budget.
I was just looking at the agenda, and I thought when I saw public comment mentioned for the last time before adjournment, I thought that this was mine.
No, we're going to give you guys, there'll be an opportunity to talk about budget.
There's number 15 gives you a chance to talk after.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Thank you. Okay, any other comments about policy? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to transportation. Anything?
No report.
Okay. Old business. Let's discuss the budget. I will turn it over to you, Ms. Penza.
May I start?
Go ahead, Mr. Dr. Otto.
I'd actually like to take item A, and maybe we'll spill into item B a little bit. I'll get it started, and then Mrs. Penza can take over. As many of you have been following, we are now at the stage of our proposed final budget in the budget process. Just for the public, the board will now need to post its proposed final budget at next Monday's voting meeting. And I do want to note for the public and our regular attenders that we only have a 1-week break due to the Memorial Day holiday, so our voting meeting is next Monday. Back to the budget. The budget that we have presented is currently balanced by making use of approximately $1.5 million in fund balance. Again, these are all proposed at this point. Nothing is final, obviously, until the board votes the final budget. Tax increase of 0.66 mils, which represents the maximum increase without using exceptions, and various other adjustments that have been made on our spreadsheet. Also embedded in that current balanced budget are proposed staff furloughs and demotions. Specifically, 20 professional staff positions are in that final budget to be furloughed, with another 11 staff members from the Encore staff slated to be demoted to approximately 70% of their current positions, which are in art, music, PE, computer, and library. Before I go to having Mrs. Penza fill in those numbers, the The program curtailment and staff demotion process that we had started back in February, which we tabled, is back on the table. If we move forward with this, again, if we move forward according to the, if nothing else happens in the intermediate time, these resolutions would need board approval to be counted in the proposed final budget. And then any changes that may take place, if the board would decide in its discussions to bring anything back, that would then cause a change in the proposed final budget, which is legal to do up until the end of the budget process.
Doctor, just to stop you there, just to give you a note, I plan on asking that these curtailments be taken one at a time. So if you can have the documentation drawn up as such, because there may be a one of those curtailments or two of those curtailments that the board may or may not want to vote to take. As they were presented last time, it was an all or none because the curtailments were a single document.
And that's pretty much the way they're prepared this time.
Well, again, we'd asked last time that they wouldn't be, and I'm asking again this time not to, because there may be a curtailment there that the board may not want to take.
I'll have to discuss that with Mr. Subers. I believe that you could reinstate any of them as listed at your discretion. There could be a...
Why would you vote them out and put them back in?
We just don't vote to curtail it.
Yeah, you would just draw resolutions up for all 5 or 6 instead of one big one.
Are there any particular ones you have in mind?
Sure.
I would need to know that.
Or is it all 5 of them?
No, not all 5. I was particularly looking at the school psychologist one myself.
Is that the only one?
That's the one I am in particular.
Can you read the 5 curtailments?
You mean the actual curtailments as they're proposed in the in the resolution? Sure. Just give me 1 second. It would be the elimination of the following professional positions: 4 encore teacher positions, computer, library, music, and art, 3 elementary teaching positions.
3.5.
Excuse me, 3.5 elementary teaching positions due to enrollment.
Wait a minute, excuse me. On this sheet it says 3. It says a 3.5 or 3?
It's 3.5. We found an additional one. Well, these are 4 votes tonight. We had to make some edits. 1 business education teaching position, 1 school psychologist, 1 middle school team of 4 positions, math, English, social studies, and science, 3 elementary teaching positions, basic math skills, 2 half-time PE teaching positions, 1 half-time science position, and 2 elementary band teaching positions.
So is it written as one resolution now?
Yes.
So how are you split it out?
I would have to discuss that with Mr. Subers.
It looks to me like you'd be talking about breaking it into 9 separate resolutions.
Sure. Absolutely. Why not?
Well, I'd suggest that if we only break out the ones that people seem to have some disagreement on.
Well, that's the point of the discussion for this evening.
I can tell you I have a problem with the elementary elimination of elementary and basic skills.
I do too.
In addition to what Mr. Keating said.
Correct. Correct.
And again, not to cash notes here, but I also asked if you would have, if you were looking to do the business education piece, that you would also going to have to do, you had for the time you did that, the reformulation of graduation requirements, removing that from it. You can't eliminate one without the other. Because you're going to have a graduation requirement that the students graduating next year or 2 years out, those that are sophomores are looking to take driver's education, and become a driver's education teacher. Therefore, you need to have that graduation requirement changed so that we can vote on that also.
That was something we were discussing in the policy committee already.
But I thought we were going to send it back to where we thought it should go, was curriculum.
And we had discussed it, so it needs to be changed to an elective. I mean, it still needs the same number of credits, but we just need to change it to something else. Not that I think it should slow the process down, but...
Yeah, Mr. Subers didn't think that was a legal issue.
Right, but I mean, I don't want it to get lost in the shop.
Correct. But he had weighed in on that. We just administratively need to know which ones we're going to be presenting to you for.
You can be presenting them all. Again, I'm going to repeat, I thought that I thought I'd made it clear that I'd like to vote on them as we added them back.
I thought we were going to put them all together to see, make sure the budget was balanced. If you start picking and choosing...
The budget's balanced either way, because when you're talking about the fund balance, look at that. So, I mean, it's... What you're going to amount to doing is you're going to amount, if you lead into this, you're going to have certain board members vote no for the entire resolution versus no for an individual program. A school psychologist, we use basic ed for an example. We went through a lot of the last 2 or 3 years to reduce our exposure to that because of IEPs and everything else, and then we'll remove a portion that can save the district significant amount of money. And, we'd like to at least have the opportunity to understand and say yes or no on that particular portion of it.
And the other thing
one
is...
person's opinion. I mean, we can vote on them all at one time. I just think that it just doesn't seem that, something this serious that you don't at least let people weigh in on the individual ones.
I don't have a problem breaking them out individually. Break them out individually.
I mean,
we'll have 9 resolutions, and we can vote on them one at a time.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I have a question. The voting meeting, is that in this sheet we're looking at?
What?
The voting meeting, what we decided in the voting meeting, is that in this latest budget? No.
APC.
APC is not in this, is it?
No,
not yet.
Okay, so that's another reason why to break it out in 9, because now you might want to... I'm not necessarily opposing that, but I think, I agree it should be broken out. 9 individual.
I have a question to Dr. Rowan. These are all still recommendations coming from the administration, correct? Like the administration believes the district can function effectively with the budget that was presented.
Yes, they don't come with a ringing recommendation to remove these programs. It's more a fiscal decision.
I just wanted to make
Yes, we won't be putting anyone in danger of not being successful in our program.
Fine, that's not what was brought up previously.
Is it the point of basic skills that take kids that are struggling in math in elementary
And you don't find that a problem?
Get them some focused one-on-one learning.
And as Mr. Shaheen pointed out, our school psychologists, we've been plugged that hole, so to speak.
Well, you can always hire a school psychologist on an outsourced basis, correct? On an hourly basis?
Hourly rate's a lot more than what we're paying now.
No, I understand that, but wouldn't you want to determine whether, first of all, you have a need? And then if you do have a need, you can always resort to hiring it on an hourly basis?
Then, Dr. Arnott, do we have a need for 3 or do we get down to 2?
At this point, we believe we could make it with 2, and if we have to worry about compliance, we could call someone back as needed.
And Dr. Arnott, you know this because you experience it every day. It's your job.
Well, I know it because we've interviewed our special ed director, Mrs. Torsha. If you would want to, I might need your help here with some of this conversation in terms of some of the research we've been doing with these. So Mrs. Torsha can certainly add in. She's had experience in the special ed field as well.
Well, I went back to Shelley Kowski and asked her what her need would be for the next year, and I had provided a link to the current numbers of students that have been evaluated from the year through April. And at this point, Shelley feels that she can go to 2, and if she would need to contract for services if timelines do get behind, and that's where she would go, or bring something back with whichever direction the board would recommend.
And Mrs. Torsha, I asked a question. There are school districts that do
what I've noticed with our budget over the last 4 years is we seem to go through and do these things in tranches, and we hang on to things that we may not necessarily need, APC being a perfect example, for an extra year or whatever the case may be. The only way you find out if you need something is if you remove it and then you monitor it, and if you feel there's a need, you can bring it back. I mean, that's what fund balance is for. Well, the point of this is to have a discussion. I mean, I'm not saying your point of view is wrong. I'm just taking my perspective on this, which is, how would you know you could do it with 2 unless you try it with 2?
If you, I very specifically asked that question. Mm-hmm. Told, why do you think we hired the third if we needed it? And that is why our litigation costs have decreased. And now I'm being told something completely different.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm
going based on information being provided by the administration.
Right. We ran for 2 for years.
The administration tells me that the reason we hired the third was to lower litigation costs, and then they go to remove the third and be told, no, there won't be a problem. I got a concern because one story is being told on one side, another story is being told when we're trying to balance it.
Excuse me, that's the same administrator.
Hold on. Though prior to the efficiencies that were put into place?
That was part of the efficiency.
No, I didn't hire that. That person got here before I did.
There had been a lack of efficiency at the time the third person was put on. Now those efficiencies are there. Do you need the 3? I'm asking the question.
The only response I have to that is I believe that the process that we put in place 3 years ago, the psychologist is part of that. It's not 100% of the factoring of it.
Can I ask you a question? How many referrals did each of them do this year?
I don't have that information in front of me.
Can you please find that out before the next meeting?
Sure.
And then also take an average of how long it takes to do 1 referral. How long it takes to do 1 complete referral. And tell me how many you did the last year, this current school year.
Dr. Rono, part of your goal last year, I believe, was reducing special ed litigation.
That's correct.
And we succeeded in doing that. And that was
very much so.
And that was an effort that you orchestrated. So
not alone, but with
your team.
Correct.
So again, you have first-hand knowledge of what we need, and you believe we can function too. So I think we should yield to your expertise in the field, and that makes sense. You're the leader of the district, and you said we can function too.
With the understanding that if we do fall behind, that it would be something that we could reinstate rather quickly.
We always know. I mean, we could always add people back.
I also want to know. I also would like to know what it costs for a contract, especially a school psychologist, an hourly rate, the average. And can you get one other piece of information? Average school district our size, how many do they employ? I think there's a law that actually, you don't double check that. Don't you have to have 1 per so many students in the district? That went away?
There never was a law for that.
I thought there was a
law. No. It's recommended caseloads, but there's no PD requirement.
Okay.
Hey, I'll yield the point. The point was that my data and my comments come from a conversation with the administration less than 6 months ago. So it wasn't like it's what was put in place. It was this is why what I put in place worked. So, I will, if the majority of the board is going to deal with it and say, okay, because they've got put in place this is where we are, just remember that, we saved several hundreds of thousands of dollars of litigation by putting this in place. And that includes the reviews and the annual, checking up on the records and everything else. Because the previous individual wasn't doing it. It was doing a poor job, so we hired the extra individual.
Well, I think that's what the point was. We had somebody who wasn't doing their job, so we hired somebody else as opposed to getting rid of that person to cover. And, I don't know. I sit there and I think to myself, if there's a way to do the job with less and we're not suffering because of it, the only way you're going to find out is to try it with less.
Right.
And then, hey, look, if we find out in October or November or December that we're getting behind in IEP evaluations or whatever it is, then you contract out on an hourly basis to catch up. And then, I know those things are sporadic. It's not like they all come in at once. There's some at one point in time. I'm sure it's lumpy in terms of the distribution. And maybe you just need to outsource that workload when it gets to be too much. But we certainly don't want to fall behind on getting those things done.
Is one of the differences if you outsource work, you won't have to take teasers and all
absolutely
medical. The rate might be a little higher, but if you put that into a position, is it really the same? Or is it...
We would have to calculate what the hourly rate would be for an employee, or keeping the existing employee, whichever psychologist that is, at their hourly rate plus benefits. I mean, that's the hourly rate.
Some people contract individually. The IU actually offers the service as well. We can get an hourly rate from them as well.
I just know that the hourly rate may seem high when you hear, oh, it's $225 an hour, but you have to compare it to exactly
Correct.
what we have now. So if you have to compare them, then give us both what it costs us currently and what the other person would cost. So compare them rather than just give us one rate.
I think that's what Mr. Bell was asking for what the rate was and approximately what their workload was, so we can get an idea.
Yeah, we can get that.
What projected costs may be with hiring a contractor.
Well, I just know contractor rates usually sound very high, but you're not paying them the medical, you're not paying them.
Yeah, so that disagreeing with what you're saying.
Hourly rate for employees, they have that number. But we'll look at school psychologists and say an all-in number for them, they can do that.
Okay, what were some of the other things on here people wanted to discuss in terms of these resolutions? Basic skills, I think, was brought up. My understanding was, basic skills is another tranche of, a regular educational program. And, were we doing basic skills in all of our buildings?
Yes.
Okay. And
except for APC.
So APC, we were not doing basic skills. And the reason for that was...
Basic skills was a service that was provided to students in grades 3 to 5.
Okay. My understanding when we introduced basic skills, it was, again, another way to compensate for, a lack of attention that some of the students were getting. And the way around that was to, just hire more teaching staff, as opposed to trying to drill in and solve the problem as to why those students weren't getting the attention they really needed from the current staffing. It would seem to me that tranching this into a separate category is something we should try to move on without. I mean, if you look at the numbers that are associated with that program, they're staggering.
I would propose that you get the special ed teacher and the teachers in here, and I want them to come to next week and discuss what would happen to those students who do not receive basic skills. I think you're going to do a huge disservice to those kids in grades 3 to 5. I can't imagine that this administrator and those teachers actually believe getting rid of that program is good for the district. That's just my personal opinion. They put it on here because it's something that we can get rid of financially, but that's not what we're now asking them.
How long has the basic skills program been in place?
Predates me, so I'd have to defer to my colleagues that have been here longer than me.
Again, we asked them to put a budget, balance a budget.
I just asked you a simple question.
I know. I'm just saying to you.
Mrs. Massaro may know.
It predates me. It's been in place when I was in the district 5 years. Past 10 years, Mrs. Massaro. Since 19.
What was the answer?
10 years.
Past 10 years.
Past 10.
More than 10.
The one thing that, and I don't want to bring up a lot of problems here, but the band, the elementary band, the way I understand the elementary band is that they take the kids out of classroom time and bring them for lesson time. And not that I'm saying it has to go, but just if we eliminated that, will kids have more time in regular classroom time so that maybe they're able to have longer math, longer
Yes.
reading, longer
Not the
Just the kids that would have been pulled.
Not the basic education.
Pardon? I heard you say something.
basic skill kids. That won't help them that extra 15 minutes.
Well, I just wondered if you...
Well, the other, I wouldn't mind discussing the elementary band would be fine, but there's no contingency plan. For 3 years, we've asked for a contingency plan. What will we do? We've never got.
We could use Governor Mifflin, we actually talked to their board president. He said he'd give us the information on how they instituted an after-school program.
But why wasn't it ever presented to us until now? We've been asking about that for 3 years.
Well, wait a minute. No, we have not been asking for that for 3 years.
Sure it has.
No, because this is the first time it's actually sitting here for discussion. It wasn't up for discussion last year, and it wasn't up for discussion the year before that, and it wasn't up for discussion the year before that.
Yes, it was.
No, you guys pulled it from the budget back in February. I mean,
it was considered.
It was considered and then dropped immediately. I mean, let's be fair here, okay? I mean, let's have an honest discussion about the issues that are in front of us.
I'll take some heat. I talked to Dr. Otto and Mrs. Trainer in February with the possibility of trying to save some experience for these kids. I mean, we're chiseling everything away at elementary. I think this is the early years of education, and we want to take it all away. I think hitting the young kids is not the thing to do. Obviously, we don't want to take it away from the high school either, but obviously everyone wants to share. We did look with Governor Mifflin. There was a possibility there. We didn't take it any further than that. It seems like a good program after school. We need to get some possible music teachers involved to participate in that. And that's about as far as it went. I was hoping that maybe this would come to where we would eliminate it. So maybe we'll need to address that.
I'd just like to back up the conversation a little bit. If we didn't have a financial problem, a lot of this wouldn't be here. But the board directed me and my administration to come to you with a zero balance budget. We did that. These are the things that are on the table. If changes are going to be made, then that's going to have to come back from the board as to what you want to put back. It's that simple.
Do the basic elementary skill children get other outside help? Like, because I know my husband works with children.
Mrs. Torch and I had long discussions about this. I'm going to ask her to step to the mic and give some overs. She also worked as a principal with this, so she can actually speak more eloquently to this than I can.
In some cases, many of the students that attended the basic skills class at Amity Reading Center, which is what I can speak best to, also were students that had an individual education plan. They were students with IEPs. This current year, if I would remain as the principal, I was promoting those students with IEPs to be instructed by their learning support teachers or their case managers to be able to give the necessary supports to the students who don't have an IEP, which would have limited the numbers drastically at AIC, who would have been attending the basic skills classrooms that did not have IEPs. So there would have been fewer numbers there. So, what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to find out if they're getting any outside help.
Only students that have IEPs would be getting outside help. If there were other students that were struggling, in some cases in the other school, girl and possibly not to see, I know they have interventions set up, and I believe, Mrs. Casey did are the students receiving math support, or is it typically reading when they're getting interventions? Okay, Ms. Long, say. Okay, so I would have to say there would be very little extra math other than what maybe their homeroom teacher is providing, which I'm sure that they are sitting with the students when we have some small group time in the morning when students would go to band. There would be less students in 4th and 5th grade, and then we would have small group time where teachers were working with students who were struggling in both reading and math areas.
Would you be able to bring in an aide to help out with that, if that were the case, if we found there was a need?
I made some phone calls today with regards to what other school districts are doing to support math, and one school district did say that they had an aide hired who does work with students, in classrooms, pulls them out, works with them one-on-one or in a small group. So that would be something that we could possibly look at. They would have to obviously be under the supervision of a teacher because they would not be highly qualified to teach math. They would be able to support.
And I know even at a high school level, I didn't know if parents could, I mean, my kids go to math classes or everything, but they still need help.
We do have parents that do work with or hire our teachers to tutor, and we have a small percentage of parents that do that. Primarily students that are identified for basic skills are students that are not proficient on the PSSA. They are students that are below basic. And typically students that are identified in basic skills, if they're put in basic skills in third grade, most of them stay remaining basic skills for third, fourth, and fifth grade. I have not seen a lot of women students at Academy 100% of students coming out of the basic skills program.
Mrs. Torture, if the student has an IEP plan, the district is obligated to follow that plan.
Absolutely.
So if the student needs special help, we have to provide that.
Correct.
Even without the basic skills program.
Correct.
Hopefully that we identify early. You know, we've discussed that for years. Obviously, the cases have dropped with that, but I'm still concerned that we keep asking every year, keep identifying or monitoring. So we haven't heard much on that. So I'd like to think it's going on.
The monitoring students who are struggling?
Yeah.
Yes. Every fall, prior to the school year starting, there are intervention plans that are put into place. We identify the students who are basic and below basic, and we do, create a monitoring system of those students throughout the school year. Teachers are expected to write plans and to continue to, collect data on those students.
Do you have any data as far as all-day kindergarten and then going to half-day? Have we seen a change? I know we asked Mr. Trainer to continue to monitor that, no problem.
I do not have any data, but I know that the last that she and I spoke with regards to that, there was not a significant decrease in the students going into first grade. She didn't mention that there was any significant delays as a result of the half-day.
Was just her findings, or was she actually surveying teachers?
I would have to go back and start.
That'd be something else.
I believe she presented to us that when we were considering it, that there were studies showing that by third grade everybody had caught up again. So,
how many years did we have full day kindergarten? I know my kid went to half day kindergarten.
I know it was in place prior to me arriving in 2008. So I would say.
it was part of the report of 4th grade.
Okay.
I'll be 10 years.
10 years full day? Because my kids had half. That's not in the resolution.
That was about 7 years ago, wasn't it?
I don't remember voting for full day kindergarten. It's good
The consensus back
it was a 5 year.
I thought they got a grant to start it, and then it just rolled into the budget.
Just in the pause here, I just want to, again, in terms of the process here, if you remember when we first floated this balanced budget model, it actually had the elimination of kindergarten and the complete elimination of extracurriculars, and the board pulled those things. So if we're at that juncture again, the administration needs to know so that we can bring forward what it is that's going to be eliminated and what's going to stay. But if you remember, that's where we started. This room was filled when we had kindergarten and sports on the table. Those were removed by board decree. So we're at that point now where if there are some things on here that members of the board just can't stomach and don't want on here, then we administratively need to know that.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at the numbers that were compiled here. Basic skills is $730,000. Psychologist is $90,000. And elementary band is almost $200,000. It's $1 million worth of programming you're bringing back. I'm not sure how you pay for that.
And on top of that, it's programming the administration says you do not need at this point.
I'm looking at the spreadsheet.
Basic skills is $280,000.
Sorry, hold on. What am I looking at?
I'm looking at 280.
Revised reduction amount based on all changes. Hold on a second.
Right, so it's not the two added together, it's just that column.
Which column am I supposed to be looking at?
The one in green.
What's the total of that column, Danielle?
The total of the green column is $1,977,347.
Right. Oh, yeah, right, my fault. 282.
No, go over 280.
280, 90, and 170. About $600,000 or 550. Wonder why how that got screwed up on my spreadsheet.
Again, I just want to make sure that we walk in with our eyes open. That was my only problem, my only comment, Mr. Basil, that we actually, it's a lot easier to get rid of these and bring some of these back. So, and you can look at me, yeah, you can go ahead, but then you've got to go and free up the revenue to bring back. We had talked to Mr. Subers, and he basically, once they're gone, they're gone. I mean, it's not as easy to bring them back as say, yeah, bring them back.
You can make a motion to reinstate them immediately at any point between now and the time you pass your final budget.
I'm talking about after the budget.
Oh.
Okay. It's just not as easy to say bringing them back.
Well, no, then that's a board decision then.
I know, but I'm saying it's just not as easy to say bringing them back. So I mean, you make it sound that it's not that easy.
No. Legally, it's you can do a motion. Let's just say tonight you voted, boom, all these were gone. Mm-hmm. By next week, if you said we want to reinstate this, you just make a motion to reinstate.
Next year, we decide we need a school psychologist. We got to find the money in the existing budget.
That's a different conversation. That's correct.
Right.
But I think the point is, at least from my perspective, is that you're going to pull that money from your fund balance now because you're talking about $500,000, or you're going to pull it from your fund balance in December when you actually need it. And so,
I got you.
My take, and this is just my opinion. I'm just 1 of 9 here, but my opinion is, I'd like to see if we could do it without it. And if we can't, you can hire a psychologist or you can outsource it, one of the two. At that point, spend the money out of fund balance. But let's not spend the money out of fund balance before we know whether or not we need to.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. You've got an excellent argument on that point. My point is the information I was providing in conversations is different than what's being provided right now.
Correct.
So,
And my concern
What
is...
conversations?
Well, my concern is, how do we know in 6 months we don't? Are we going to get true information that we do or we don't need these again?
When did these things first appear to us?
I'm telling you,
When did these things first appear to us?
Okay,
They first appeared to us back in the beginning of the year. Specifically, the Finance Committee said, show us a balanced budget so we have time to discuss it. And we're sitting here now acting like we're looking at these things for the first time, bringing up all these conversations.
Well, because Mr. Seminaro, I had the same
not before. These 10 things have been sitting here since November.
Mr. Seminaro, I had the same conversation as Mr. Sheen with a different time, and I had the same thing.
What conversation was that from November to now? I didn't hear that conversation.
It was asking administration whether you would actually support getting rid of it. And they go, no. Now tonight they're sitting here going, yes.
Listen, I mean, I don't know what you guys did, but for the past several months, I thought long and hard about all these things, and I'm prepared to give you my take.
That's fine, but
on each of these things. I don't know why you guys are acting like you're seeing this and hearing it for the first time.
I have a question, and not against you personally. Did you call any administration and talk to them? I call administrators and talk to them, and then if push comes to shove, they'll tell you privately, no.
Why don't you tell those administrators to come here and talk to all 9 of us?
I agree with you.
Why are you calling administrators and talking to them on the phone?
Why not?
Because you tell them to come here.
I did.
That's how you get all this chatter back.
One of them is here. One of them sitting at the table.
And he told us what he believed.
But that's not what he told us.
Well, things change, and now he's recommending that. This is the most current information.
2 weeks ago, I get one answer. Tonight, the person sitting here goes, no. So
one-on-one conversation doesn't mean crap.
Okay.
Doesn't mean anything.
Okay, then
it's what we do here at these meetings.
Don't you feel, though, 2 months ago we were deeper in the hole, and the number keeps coming down? We're finding some additional funds. Wouldn't it be prudent to go in there and look at something now? And I think that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what we're doing. So we're not here playing dumb, that we didn't see these months ago. We're just saying right now.
You're not giving me the revenue, though. You're saying, oh, I don't want to lose this, I don't want to lose that. You're not bringing me the revenue.
Okay, let me ask this. Okay, Birdsboro Armor Cast. They owe us what? $94,000?
About $90,000.
Okay. I met with the business manager several weeks ago. I've been asking this for several weeks. Birdsboro was in the paper that they're mysteriously getting $9,000 from Armor Cast, which will be paid by October, which we go towards the police force, I believe, for bulletproof vests. I heard that there's emails that went out, and this is administrated by Berks County, that we will be getting that tax money, correct?
We have some of it. There was an agreement between
Right.
the tax claim and ArmorCast.
Right.
Their first payment was due February 15th. Their second payment is due June 5th. Third payment's October 5th, and the final payment is February of 14th.
Where is that money? Is that shown in this budget?
It's part of my delinquent revenue in local revenue. It's factored into what we're getting as delinquent money. So the answer would be yes.
I think this is just an issue of, look, as a board, as Mr. Sermonaro said, I mean, these items have been on the agenda here since November. And the merits of whether something stays or goes, I mean, I think we've discussed those issues. This is just a question about money. And that's really what it is. How much fund balance do you have to pay for the programs that you want to support? And Mr. Sermonaro was saying, well, where's the revenue coming from? There's only one source for revenue, and the revenue is fund balance. So this becomes a discussion of how much fund balance are you going to spend to subsidize the programs going forward? Because it's not coming from another source.
There are.
I think you're misunderstanding. I want to make sure that everybody, and I understand, I want to make sure that everybody fully understands the ramifications, and I don't believe everybody did 100% of what happens if we eliminate certain programs. I want to make sure you know if we eliminate the school psychologists and we eliminate basic skills, that the board members who were not here 5-6 years ago when we were being hit with $100,000 for this, or $80,000 for that they could potentially come back. That's my point, okay? And I want to make sure that the administration, Dr. Otto in particular, is fully cognizant that he's responsible if that happens. And I believe he is, but that's my point. Not that I want to pick and choose from here. I want to make sure you're fully aware that this is a potential, real side effect of eliminating certain things around this list. Period. Okay?
You might be cutting off your nose despite your face.
I mean, you were not here in the fact it's an insurance. Now, is it worth the $500,000 insurance policy?
Look, I mean, can I just comment? I would agree with that there are, what he has just said, there are risks to all of these. But there's, again, as has been said from the beginning of this process, which you said, Mr. Sermonaro, from the beginning, we have a financial problem that we need to solve as well.
So, look, this is a question of mitigating the risk. In terms of the psychologists, we're going to talk about these one things one at a time. We didn't have a process in place before, if you recall. I mean, it was like this willy-nilly, we get these. It wasn't until we actually started reading the legal opinions of our attorneys as to why we were paying out such large sums in terms of litigation settlements that we realized that all the things that were being missed. And I think it wasn't necessarily an issue of the number of psychologists we had or the number of counselors or the number of this or the number of teachers or whatever. It was a question of people were slipping through the cracks of the system because nobody was identifying who they were, no one was tracking who they were on a long-term basis, and making sure that those needs, those IEPs were being met. And I didn't think we had a very good process to fulfill the other part of the obligation, which is to seek and find these students. That changed dramatically 3 years ago. We put a process in place to track these, not only seek and find these kids, but then to track them to make sure that they're getting the help that they need. Now, whether you need 3, 5, 2 psychologists, I don't have the answer to that. I got to rely on the administration to say to us, yeah, we can do it or we can't do it. They seem to think they can do it. If we find out that they're not tracking or they're not, these kids aren't getting, the IEPs aren't getting written up in a timely basis, then we realize that maybe 2 is not enough.
I think if you and this is what I think Dr. Otto comes back and tells you, and we looked at this in curriculum, I believe it was earlier in the year, early last September or the year before, that when the school psychiatrist came in and said the number of reviews they do and the time it takes them to do the review and the testing and write it up, I think you'll very quickly realize the numbers can't be accomplished with 2. And we may have to look at hiring a contract employee to do it. Well, let him come back with the numbers for you to see that. That's my point on this. Maybe because I had that information where you look at the numbers, and it takes them a good amount of time to do the testing, not just an hour. We're talking hours. and then they analyze those results, and then write the report up, and the numbers that they do on an ongoing basis, at least the numbers that I was provided, I'd have to dig them up, by the school psychologist who was in the room at the time, during the committee meeting, you'll find that you're not going to be able to go through the school population in the time you need to go through them. So you may have to hire a contract employee.
Maybe from the board's perspective, maybe the curriculum instruction committee, if it's meeting on a monthly basis, can be looking at the numbers every month. And you can say, hey, look, how many IEPs are you guys doing? How many do you have to do? Are you on schedule to get them done? Are you not? And you can monitor it on a monthly basis. I imagine we have all this information available. And you can start to tell, maybe by October or November or December, are we ahead? Are we behind? Is there a risk here? Do we need to bring somebody in? I mean, as a board, I think there's other things that we can do to help monitor this.
We do monitor that administratively.
The other thing is, it's not just getting a complete report. There are deadlines for PDE. It's now 60 calendar days, not 60 school days. So you've shortened the time when a parent does a referral to the testing has to be done. That's why we went from 2 to 3 to begin with. It wasn't just getting proper reports. It was also that now this deadline is shortened tremendously. So having to do the amount of referrals in 60 days, and that's 60 calendar days. And guess what? Over Christmas, Thanksgiving holiday, that's 68 calendars ticking. It's not just getting a report. It's like
let's just get the numbers.
So that's a big thing too.
Danielle, this one that's listed as 3 full-time elementary teachers that you said is now 3.5. So is that number still 280, or is it?
Yeah, I just on that side of this sheet. I'm sorry I didn't put the 0.5, but on the left side in the pink, you'll see that I did have it. So the 280 is reflective of the 3.5. Right. Yeah.
It might be a good time for you, Mrs. Penza, I had combined my comments there in A and B to maybe just go over some of the other items on here to give the board members time to reflect on some of this while you do that. Go ahead.
Some of the changes from the last time that you had seen this budget worksheet, again, there's some additional savings there for the elimination of the 3.5 now elementary teachers. There's a reduction in savings for the 2 PE positions due to the actual people. That's what all of these are based on. We received some legal opinion from Mr. Subers based on whether long-term sub-years count or don't count, and that then changed all of these that you're seeing here. So there was also additional savings to the 4 middle school core teachers, additional savings for the basic skills, additional savings for the elementary encores. There was a reduction in actually my office budget for the PFM budget model. We were budgeting money for next year. At the last board meeting, you had approved us to do the 1-year contract, so I took that out for next year. And then based on some board approvals for coaches and extracurricular, there's a small adjustment. So currently we're looking at proposed expenditures of $52,744,202. On the revenue side, straight from those additional savings as well as those reduction in savings, as you've been seeing throughout this process, our Social Security reimbursement and retirement reimbursement have been adjusted accordingly. Also, at this time, because we are looking at doing the proposed final budget, this is the time that the state provides us with the 2020 aid and allows us to input the property tax revenue from the slot machines. And if you'll recall, like I said, we have to go through this every year. When I do the preliminary budget, local taxes are at 95% is what our collection rate is. When we get this money from the state, we are going to get 100% of the funds. So in this instance here, I had to add that 5% back, which is about $59,000. So that's uncollectible revenue. So currently our proposed revenues are at $51,286,402. The result of both of those two right now, as Dr. Otto had mentioned, is using the fund balance of $1,457,800.
Might be a good time to also, once Danielle's or Mrs. Penz is finished, to talk about what the board's wishes are relative to the APC money that we've represented, because we haven't really talked about that yet.
Right, that money is not reflected, and then there is about $646 based on the student accident insurance if you approve Plan A, or Double A versus what I have in the budget. Actually, we can save about $600. So I would just need to know, for my benefit, the result of tonight, just so I know where you guys want to go for what I'm presenting you to vote on for next Monday.
Well, I would think that would go, for the time being, into this estimated fund balance available for discussion, correct? I mean, does anybody have any objections with that?
So we would increase that number by 300, approximately 297, as we represented that number.
Right.
You're
going to increase the estimated fund balance available by $297,000.
We just want to show on the revenue what that projected savings.
$992.
You would share the savings on the expense side. So you would be looking at about 1.15 of 1.16 of fund balance.
I hate using fund balance because it's put you in the hole by that amount following you automatically. So that's part of the problem with this year. The good guys last year.
Is that it?
That's all I have.
Okay.
I think it's good we're talking about this tonight, because nothing's sprung on us at the voting meeting or board members. If we have objections to anything, it would probably be best and prudent to iron them out now so we can get a budget passed on Monday. Just mine.
Well, we're not passing the
budget.
You're just posting a budget.
The Monday vote is a proposed final. That, by law, has to sit for 30 days.
Not on the final, on the proposed final. But it's an actual vote.
That is actually a vote, Mr. Kurtz. But that, again, can be changed up to the very end by the board until it's passed. I guess it's June 20th, this 27th, 24th, I believe, this year.
No, Mrs. Denza, we're voting on the curtailments on Monday.
That's kind of part of what I'm sitting here going through my mind as you're all having the discussion. If I come the way it is now with the proposed final with all of these out, and then I don't know which one you would vote on first. If you voted on the proposed final first, that would almost force your hand with the curtailments.
No.
Well, no, in a sense, if you're going to approve the proposed final the way that it is.
Yes.
Well, I think the way we'd approach that, we're going to vote on the curtailments one at a time, and then when we get to the end, we'll know what we're doing vis-a-vis the final budget.
But I have to actually have you that document to actually review and vote on, and I need a signature that night to send to.
Well, what we would have is you'd have a dollar figure based on the numbers you provided us.
No, because as Mrs. Torshey can probably tell you, depending upon what you pick and pull out and put back in, it's going to change the flow of people. So it's going to change those numbers. So again, we can make the changes.
Well, wait a minute, though. We would have 4 days after our meeting on the 20th to actually post this thing, correct? We have to post it by the 24th.
It has to be posted a month ahead of time, but yeah, we could.
So we've got a few days to decide what we're doing in terms of after we've voted or not voted on these resolutions, these 9 resolutions. We'll know at that point in time what's staying, what's going. We can vote to post a budget that reflects those numbers, those resolutions as decided, correct? And then that gives you 2 or 3 days to modify the numbers on the resolution that needs to be emailed to the board for its viewing, and then the board secretary and president would sign it, correct?
Well, no, you would vote Monday night with it the way that you wanted. I mean, I'm going to present it to you however we leave here tonight. Monday night, you can, I believe last year we had a millage increase in there, and I believe the board at that meeting on the fly decided to do a 0. You still signed it that night and approved it that way. I went back to the office on Tuesday and made those changes and then posted that version. So that would be the same thing that would happen. I'm going to present you something. You can make a motion to approve based on modifications of however you're going to do it. You'll still sign it. I'll go back to the office and make those adjustments, and that's what will then be posted for the public viewing for the 30 days.
I have a question. The one we're looking at, you have the increased taxes to what, the index?
It's just the index.
How about the 2 exemptions? They're not in there.
They're out based on the direction of the board. If you look up at the bottom.
So they're not in here, so again, those are possibilities.
The 2 exceptions have been removed at this point based on the direction of the
So
board,
again,
so
that's
they are
something-
available.
That's board deliberation,
Was
yes.
that a binding motion? We would need to repeal that, right?
No, it wasn't.
No.
No.
Oh. So
It would be at the discretion of the board to change the budget
It
accordingly.
wasn't.
It would require your vote.
There's nothing binding until June 24th.
So those are 2 other topics that need to be discussed. Or possible discussion, I should say.
Well, at this point, oh, go ahead.
I mean, at this point, I voiced my concern, in my opinion. I have no problems voting for one at a time or all at the same time. I just want to, voice my concern and what we need to get here, and my concern with moving. So it's up to the expediency of the board. If you want to vote all at one time or 9 individuals, it's up to the board.
Well, I have a question. Again, talking about 2 exemptions, when are you going to talk about those? Or no
Talk about them right now. If you've got an argument you want to make, go ahead and make it.
Well, again, if you're going to say some of the stuff that was talked about by Mr. Shaheen about school psychology and basic ed, I mean, the basic skills, the special ed exemption is $152,000. You probably put one exemption in, you could pay for that person and part of basic skills. Plus, you can also put the APC monies back in. So again, those are 2 topics that would basically fund the 2 things Mr. Shaheen had concerns about. If you put the APC money towards it, so some of it, and you can put one exemption, special ed exemption. Just a thought for discussion. Doesn't mean you have to take them. I mean, just because they're not in now doesn't mean you can't talk about it, or not, you can't put them in.
So you're saying raise taxes, add in the APC money, bring back those certain programs, and then what happens next year? Then the taxes stay high, we still don't have the money for the program, then what do we do the following? Do we raise taxes again, keep it again? I mean, it's just a snowball.
I'd like to ask, are we going to consider raising taxes to these programs that the administration has said we can function without? I think that's an important point to make.
Or for that matter, raise taxes when you have fund balance available to use.
What is our overall fund balance now?
It's on the sheet there.
$4.4 million.
What is our cap? What's that, 8%?
It's 8%.
About 4.
Well, hold on a second. I'm working on your revised expenditures at the moment here. So.
I mean, we're close to the top of our fund balance max out here.
Right, but what you need to, and I don't have the number for you because we're not at the end of the year yet. Some of what will come off of that is our prepaid expenses into the new year. So, I mean, it's not going to be a lot, but it could be about $200,000. So, but yes, we are.
We're going to go surplus again this year, right?
That's what we're projecting at this point, which is why that number is
So
now
it may almost be a wash.
4.4 is where we're projecting to end the year.
It's about 5%. If you look at the estimated available 4.4 and you divide that by the current estimate of expenses of 52, whatever it is, million, 52,744,000, it's 5.6%.
No,
it's not. No, it can't be 5.
It's going to be less than that if you use a fund balance.
50 million, and 5% of that is.
with your revised expenditures with the APC and the insurance that I noted, 8% of that is about 4.19 million. So you're a little over at the 4.4.
Are you projecting on this year's budget or next year's budget?
I'm looking right. Yeah.
You have to use next year's expenditures.
Right, so next year's expenditures
Are 52,445.
correct.
8% of that
And
is
8% of that is 4.2.
$4.2 million.
52.744.
I'm adding in the APC.
Oh.
Either way, I mean, $300,000, isn't going to.
But what But if the board chooses, obviously, to use fund balance to balance the budget, that does not get counted towards the 8%.
Okay, that's where our numbers differ. I was looking at the overall fund balance.
Sorry.
And the cap is 8%, correct?
Correct.
So we've got to use fund balance in some manner.
Or you could transfer it to capital.
Yeah, but we're already using 1 point.
Right, so if you take that out, correct.
1.5 million. To balance the budget as she's currently presented, it's $1,457,800, not including APC.
But that's also, that's going to the index.
So if you take that off for the 1.4, you're down to 3-ish.
But that's going to the index.
That's a tax increase to the index.
Correct.
I'm just reminding people.
Correct.
How much would how much is that tax increase going to raise if we were to take that tax increase out? How much would that cost?
$666,000.
We're talking about that back in the program. I mean, that should be on the table too, if so many people want reducing that tax increase. Just putting that out there.
Well, then the discussion's opened up again to kindergarten, where the big numbers coming from. Kindergarten, sports. Last time we talked about that, pitchforks and torches out here waiting for us, the whole room filled with people. I mean, I think the public spoke pretty clearly on the fact that they wanted those.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm an advocate for a tax increase. I'm just saying there's things that the public's made very clear that they're not willing to forgo.
And I think it's interesting to note that people are, I mean, there hasn't been an outcry about these other proposals as well that we're just now bringing to the forefront.
Right. I agree. There has been a real big outcry on the millage up to the index. I do believe, although I'd like to see more sometimes because it's self-evolving as you go on, the money's there. I do believe if we bring back the 2 other exemptions, pitchforks and tornado wagons in the back. So.
Well, look, I mean, I think it's interesting to note.
Almost every district in the county is doing, well, not every, there are a lot of them doing an increase this time. Some of them aren't.
You know, we had a spending freeze in place for this year, and we're throwing a surplus. We had projected to spend $1.3 million. Mm-hmm. We're throwing a surplus. I have a hard time raising taxes only to find out we're throwing surpluses at the end of the day. And I understand people have the same concern about cutting programs if we're throwing surpluses. So it comes down again, as I said before, to an issue of how much fund balance do you want to spend. The difference, I think, between cutting a program and raising taxes is you can add a program back with a vote. It's a little bit more difficult to retract on taxes.
Well, I don't think that we could say to use fund balance to bring a program back, as you said, if we're still putting tax increase out there.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said, I don't believe that we could go ahead and say, let's use more fund balance to bring back the program, and we're still raising taxes.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think you have to do both.
If we're going to bring a program back, then you need to look at bringing taxes off of it, and then use fund balance to countersink. And I'm not supporting that measure right now, so I think we got, again, I'm not disputing anything that's on the sheet. I just want to make it clear to everybody. I think we balanced it. We vote on it next Monday, and let the vote go where it is, and then we're going to work on it from there.
Anybody have any other thoughts they'd like to share?
I'm just concerned that next year, the board that's going to be seated here, they're going to be looking at the same choices that we started with this year. Kindergarten, sports.
Don't disagree with you.
Remember, though, we're in the business of educating, and I think hopefully that new board remembers that.
Look, we can't discuss, I mean, that's a hypothetical. I mean, we got to deal with what we're dealing with now.
The students do come first. And I'm sorry if I can say something different. I do pay taxes. $500,000, I think, is more of a maintenance tax for what we're seeing in some districts. Sometimes it's 3 times that in other school districts. So to get out of here with $500,000 a year, so
it's tough to compare our millage rate with other districts. I'm paying 130 something mills for Poconos, but the mill isn't equivalent to what our mill is. So you got to look at the dollar, probably to equate it, probably pretty close to being similar. So.
And hopefully there again, we're basing what the administration is telling us they can work with and still put out a quality student. And I hope we can keep doing that over the years. We need to offer a variety in the school, so I just hope we can do it.
I think we have to control our undesirable expenses and not push it on the taxpayer to pay that bill. So until we get those expenses where we want them to be and where we think are manageable for the revenue that we bring into this district, the answer isn't to raise taxes for the taxpayer.
I would agree.
So the direction for Mrs. Penza as far as posting a budget is?
I think as is.
Okay.
Clarification, we're doing the 9 separate resolutions.
Yeah, I think that was clear that we'll do 9 separate resolutions.
We're aware of that.
That way we can vote on each one individually.
Well, that's all part of the deliberation.
That's all part of the deliberation discussion on Monday. Right now, it's
at 0.66.
We're talking about the index, so I think there'll be discussion next Monday on which one of these things stay and go, and how much fund balance we're going to use, and whether taxes stay where they are or go higher or lower.
If you remember back in November, Mrs. Hamill, when we presented this budget, we said there were levers to pull. The levers are pulled by the board. What you do with taxes, what you do with fund balance, what you do with program cuts. That's.
And I'm just thinking if we start changing everything, I'm trying to figure out what the final figure will be.
Well, that's what
Mrs. Penza has to reach.
I'm not going to know until I go back to the
right. That's all part of the conversation.
You would approve saying, okay, we're not going to raise taxes, or we're going to put this program back, and then you're going to approve that. But the final number you'll get after we go back and see who all the bumping is.
Right, and that's where I'm like.
That's what you'll see when it's posted for.
You don't really know what we're really approving until you go back and fix all these numbers.
But you're going to know that before we get to the final vote in June.
Right.
Yes.
So we'll have a committee of the whole meeting in June where we'll discuss budget again, and then we'll have a final vote at the end of June where there'll be a time for more discussion.
Mrs. Pence, I know you've already said this, I apologize, but can you, one more time?
Sure.
If we use the 1.4, 1.5 million fund, what's the remainder of the fund balance with APC back in? With APC included in that?
3.281, I think.
3.2.
I have fund balance.
So
instead of the 1.4, I have it at the 1.15.
So you lowered it there. You lowered it on that side.
Correct.
Yeah. And then we end up with 3.2 available?
Correct.
Okay. Another way to look at it is if we keep it at 1.4, then we have 3.2 available. 3.3 available.
If you would take
no,
the
it'll be
revenue out.
It'll be 3.3
projected.
Wait. I'm sorry. You lost me, Mr. Seminary.
If we left it, let's say we
netting
make a
out the
decision that we're going to use 1.4 million of fund balance.
Okay. That's the plug number
Just
for
as
fund
it's
balance.
plugged right into
Just as it's plugged in right now.
Okay, that's fine.
What is the remainder available fund balance with APC at 297?
Okay, what was that number there?
It'll be about 3.3 then.
3.3.
I've got 3.281558 and 13 cents.
Okay.
And our original number for the fund balance was 1.7 when we started out.
Sorry, I don't know.
Correct.
Which time? Which iteration?
Back to me. When March 8th, I have placeholder we put in of 1.735.
So that moved up and down.
That changed.
That was moving up and down.
What's it takes with
early on
with bumping and everything else that was going on.
In February, it was 1.93 million. February 27th, March 8th, the number changed to 1.7.
And we had agreed when we did the zero budget model that fund balance would be the variable.
And have we gotten any word from Harrisburg exactly what our lovely governor will give us?
Rumors that it may go down a little bit. Rumors. Nothing definite.
Again, if that happens, then fund balance like that.
Well, the only thing I've heard out of Harrisburg is that revenues are behind where they projected. So that could only mean bad news, but no announcement.
My only concern is in terms of fund balance use. How much fund balance are you using this year? And what does that leave you to cover the following year? Or whatever it could be. Yes, I have. Yeah.
What would that fund balance be?
I'd have to take a look at it now. I mean, I'll share that with the board. I'll email it. You probably want Ms. Penza to take a look at it before I give you what I did.
Yes, we would appreciate that.
Because we want to make sure we have enough fund balance to cover any shortfalls coming up in the next year.
Well, the pension itself is going up to, 20% next year?
16,930.
I'm sorry,
23.1 or 21.3? 21.3, I think, isn't it?
There's words that be capped at it.
And unfortunately,
well, there's words that it could be capped this year,
Yeah.
so we could have changes, but it's all when they pass whatever.
Again, my thought is, when I'll talk about fund balance, we'll talk about $6.3 million on the other side. Understand the future board may have to use some of that money to make it home in the next year also.
and not to belittle it, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, if you don't go to the index, you lost that next year. That's also, not only do you use fund balance this year, but if you don't raise taxes, you lose that revenue next year. And
But you can always pull that lever next year.
I'm just saying.
I mean, next year you could pull the lever for the taxes,
Sure,
the index, plus special exceptions.
Sure, you could.
I think it makes sense to be as agile as we can when it comes to this, and we can respond. It's not impossible to respond to changes. So I don't think we should, like I said before, if the administration comes forward with a recommendation that we think is functional, I think we should trust our administrators. That's why they're here. And again, we can go back and we can change things. We have that ability. It's not like we make a decision once and that's how it is forever. We can change.
Mr. Kirchner could be sitting here next year with a lot of other levers to pull as far as program maintenance other than what we'll put back in this year. And I want to make sure we have enough fund balance to be able to cover something.
I don't really understand what you mean.
Well, I'm saying next year when you have a budget, okay, this year we came up with about $1.9 million worth of program curtailments. Next year, if we're in the same $4 to $5 million hole, your options may be limited to a tax increase with the exemptions and as much fund balance as you can use. And I want to make sure that we have as much fund balance as you can use available.
Yeah, I'm just saying I'm not saying even next year, but we can go back even in September, even in October.
And add something back. I got that, yeah. But I want to make it, the board's always been accused of never looking forward, okay? And there's 4 or 5 of us that will be leaving. I want to be able to at least say, you got a little bit of a safety net into the next year because I don't envision an end to this economic crisis yet. And with the governor, looking to potentially reduce or flatline what we got last year, who knows what we're going to do next year. If he's still going. And I do appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, again, I make sure that because you don't want to go out and have to go to a 1.2 mil tax increase next year, eliminate all sports, all extracurriculars, kindergarten, and all your fund balance is gone too. Then you got nothing.
And we're not saying right now.
Right, no. I'm just, if we end up in that hole, we always seem to end up into a $4 to $5 million hole, and it's not going to get smaller.
Well, I just, in projecting, I do want to, we are slowly running out of cut levers.
That's what I mean. We don't have a lot left. We're pretty bare.
Any other comments from board members?
I have an item C.
You have an item C? Well, before we move on,
Okay.
I just want to make sure we've beaten this to death. Nothing? Okay. Okay. We sort of, I guess, talked about program curtailments and staff demotions. Do you have something to add
No, that
to
was all part of that process.
Discussion?
Yes, A and B have been discussed.
Okay, let's move on to the District Cyber Charter Program Initiative.
Okay, moving on. Per the request from various board members, we administratively have followed up on potential cyber charter options for our students who are currently attending cyber charter schools. Just a quick comment to the public: for any student that is a Daniel Boone resident that so chooses, they may access any of the cyber charter schools in the state of Pennsylvania, and the cost per student that we get from the state then follows that student out the door. What some districts are beginning to do is model their own program that invites those students to stay here, so that that money stays with us and less of it is allocated to go out the door, and we actually fund our own cyber charter program from the delta of saving that money. Mrs. Torsha, Mr. Hankel, and Mr. Boyer and I have researched a few options. I'm going to ask Mrs. Torsha to step up in case there are questions. And we believe at this time that one option that can get us started rather quickly in the area of offering an in-house cyber option is to proceed to work with a company called VLN Associates, who are currently doing the same sort of, this is what they do, there are many contractors out there now, doing the same sort of programming with other schools. We have actually copied you as board members on the details of this programming and what it would entail and some of the financial savings we could expect. The only thing I would say is you're not signing any contract per se, so it does protect the district, and it leaves us with some flexibility as if we find a different provider that might actually give us more savings. But we're at the very infancy here in Daniel Boone of getting this started, but we are recommending moving fairly quickly. So based on the information that we've given you and some of the options that, some of the things we can do, we'll certainly entertain any questions you might have about that, but we would like your blessing to get moving on this.
Well, what's our upfront? Is there our upfront?
No, Mrs. Torsha, go ahead. I'm going to give Mrs. Torsha, she actually did a lot of the legwork here, so I'm going to let her answer some of your questions, and I'll chime in as needed.
There are no upfront costs. The only time that any costs are incurred by the school district is when they actually get students to come back from the cyber schools that they are in. So if they pull one student back from 21st Century Cyber School, then we would incur a cost for that student now to be in our own cyber program, which would be a cost that we would be able to control. It would traditionally approximately $9,000 is spent on a regular ed student going into a cyber school that we have no control over, and the cost for special education is about $16,000. So any student, special ed or regular ed, that would come to the Daniel Boone Cyber School would cost approximately $5,500.
So it becomes, that's your built-in budget. It's a cost avoidance model rather than a revenue enhancement model. So instead of that $9,000 going out the door, we cut off a certain portion of that by being able to do it in-house at less of a cost.
Is that a one-time fee for that student?
No, it's annual.
Every year?
Every year the student would choose to, and we have no control over that, Mr. Potts, as I believe our budget now is in excess of $1 million going out the door.
We currently have
I believe that was in the materials we sent you.
95 students that are leaving our school and going to cyber school.
Cyber and regular charter, but the majority of those has now become cyber. That has rocketed in the last 3 years as these cyber charter companies have become better at attracting students.
Are some of these homeschool kids that you've got having this report here, are they taking cyber programs as well?
I'm sure that they are, and I had asked Mark Ware to figure those out, but there are multiple families that have the same children that are attending cyber school, so that's my assumption, that they're modeling their homeschool model by using cyber.
So are they lumped in as cyber school students, or are they lumped in as homeschooled students?
They officially petitioned the board to allow them to be homeschooled, but then what they choose to do with their curriculum is entirely up to them. So, on our records, they would be coming up homeschooled, but when we see a student leaving, or when we see them also at a cyber school, we're assuming that's what the parents are using as their curriculum.
Okay, I guess where I'm going with is, where does the money go? So if someone's homeschooled, there's no money leaving the school district?
Well, yes, there is.
Okay, where does that?
$9,000 if they're a regular education student.
But okay, so we just don't get that money from the state.
Correct.
Correct. But if they start taking classes somewhere else, the $9,000 instead of staying with Harrisburg goes to the cyber charter school or cyber school.
Yeah, but that goes through us to them, doesn't it?
Yes.
To pass.
Okay, so if you're
It's part of our
homeschool student who then decides to go to cyber school, then it has to show up on our records as being a cyber school student.
Well, that's what I was just asking.
My
Is cyber
understanding is that we are not allocated funds for a homeschool student. We can't count them as part of our child accounting. But when they decide to choose a cyber school, the school district has to be billed for that money. So for a homeschool student, we're not collecting money to begin with.
But I guess the question was, the number that shows up being homeschooled, there is no money going out from those students to a cyber school. And if they are, they're paying it out of their own pocket.
No, that would be false. If they're homeschooling and they're choosing to use 21st Century or any other cyber school program, the bill's coming back to us because we're the resident of the...
So
that's the way the law is written.
Okay, so I get that. I guess the question I have then is that the number we have here on this report, which says 6 charter school students, 85 cyber school students, and 46 homeschool students. You're telling me that the 46 homeschool students are not taking cyber classes? Because if they were, they'd be showing up as a cyber school student.
Or we're double counting.
Or we're double counting.
Right. I'm assuming that the 46 students are pure homeschool students.
Okay. That was my question.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That was the point I wanted to make.
I'm sorry.
So essentially, if these 85 cyber school students came back to the school district, just to sort of summarize, there'd be a cost avoidance of about $4,000 per student for a regular education student. And even more money, if it was a special education student, it'd be almost $11,000.
If they chose
a
cyber option.
Our cyber option.
Correct. If they just came back to our school, it would be more.
Correct. Okay.
The ultimate goal is always to try to get them back into our own program, but if they don't want to do that, short of that, we would have the middle option of saying, all right, come back, enroll with us. We run the program, you can still get a Daniel Boone diploma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what this program allows them to do.
School districts that are using this model then are successful in bringing the students back even partially to the school and having a blended model. So then that $5,500 would be reduced even further because the students wouldn't be taking all of the credits at cyber school. They would be accessing our own school district credits for some courses. So we have that option. Currently, students who are attending a cyber school that's not ours, that we're not promoting, don't have the option to come into our school to take credits. If they would, we would have to go back to the cyber school, and I could have
That's the policy that we're just passing.
the cyber school would pay that tuition.
So if it's a blended model, what does the state do with the reimbursement portion of the money?
Well, for a blended model, if it's our own, I imagine then that we just...
Is it the full tuition as opposed to they're enrolled here physically, or is it the $9,000?
Well, they would still be enrolled in the Daniel Boone School District if they go to a Daniel Boone cyber school. They would be our student. So I believe the subsidy that we would be receiving would come to us then. And then of that subsidy, $5,500 would have to go to pay for their portion of
Or something less than that if it's a blended model.
Right. Because then they're enrolled in Daniel Boone. Right now, they're not enrolled in Daniel Boone at all.
Is there any, again, this is just thinking down the road, any designation on the diploma that would say cyber? Because I know right now you graduate to whatever, Section 101 or whatever you called it, it says cyber school.
Right. They would receive a Danny Boone School District.
I think the only place you can handle that, and that might be a legal issue, is a transcript issue, and their transcript would be sent forward to a university or post-secondary. We might be able to indicate something on there. Because the courses would have to, when you show courses, you'd have to list them as taken at VLN so that the colleges would see that, but I don't think you would differentiate diplomas. That would be one of the that actually, frankly, is one of the features to attract students back, to give them the Daniel Boone diploma.
So according to these numbers, if you pulled back 100% of the cyber school students, it'd be around $350,000 in cost avoidance on the part of the school district. What is a likely target? It's not going to be 100%. Have you guys looked into what other school districts who have adopted these programs? What's the rollout rate? Is it 10%? Is it 5%? Is it 20%?
It's all over the place, to be honest with you. I don't think that anybody's been doing it long enough to be able to give concrete data as with regards to how much they are not putting out to the other schools. Ultimately, what school districts that I have spoken to and that we have visited are really trying to pull the kids back into the brick and mortar building, our high school, our middle school, and so that you have a complete pure savings, that you have no money going out at all anywhere. Concord Weiser is only in their first year. Exeter is just scratching the surface and looking at the model that IU is providing. Governor Mifflin has been using the IU for a long time, but I know that for a couple of years. I do know that they do a lot of door knocking, telephone making to keep students, to come back, to return at least to their cyber model. But I can try to work on some data for you.
Does VLN have any input on that? I mean, because we're not the only school district they do business with. I'm sure they do business across the state or across the country. So they've got to have some statistics. Now, are they offering a class that's almost identical to, let's say, Century 21?
Yes.
Or what?
They remind themselves that they can make themselves more marketable to pull the students back. And then on top of it, if we would roll with VLN partners, they would eventually like to take our curriculum and turn it into a cyber curriculum so that it could even pull more students back in and make it even more appealing, because there might be classes that they really, really would like to take, but they don't want to come into the school, but they would really like to have access to that program. So there's a growth model with this particular program that could evolve into some other areas.
Would there be a cost to that? I'm sorry.
There would be a cost for that. And the cost would be dependent upon how we wanted to create our program.
Well, with the way the cyber schools now is our student leads, and if they want to come back and take a class here, then we decided to charge a tuition of some sort.
Well,
so would that mean that even if our cyber school had our kids and they wanted to come take an extra math class, would we then charge them for coming back into the mortar?
That's the policy.
No, we wouldn't charge students. We couldn't charge students that are in our cyber model because we're paying for that. If a student has left and went to 21st Century Cyber School and they wanted to come back to Daniel Boone, we could try to charge, but we wouldn't charge them.
We have a policy for that.
We have to charge the cyber school, and there's no guarantee that they would pay that when they feel like they're meeting that curricular need for the student.
Now, if a student from Twin Valley enrolls in our cyber, do we get the 9, or do you get nothing and it just all goes to the cyber charter school?
We wouldn't get anything. I'm not sure how that would work.
We wouldn't ask Twin Valley kids to take our cyber program.
Well, I'm just saying, maybe somebody lives in Twin Valley and they'd want to enroll in Daniel Boone's.
I think we have to negotiate or work out with that school district. I know that and speaking to Fleetwood and to Brandywine did most of the legwork of creating and getting the vendor, which is what VLN is. They're a cyber curriculum vendor, and they have the teachers and they provide perfect fit for the Fleetwood students, and I know that they're going to end up separating, or they're going to end up doing something a little bit different. So I'm not sure how it would work with a Twin Valley or an Exeter student coming within our program.
Because they can enroll in any cyber school, but if they choose the Daniel Boone cyber program, the money goes to VLN from the state?
We would have to decide whether or not we have to cover the $5,500 for that program, but we would have to decide if we want to add tuition on top of it, and then create revenue that way.
I see. Any other board members have questions on? I'm the only one. Okay. Thank you.
Again, I think as long as there's no cost to us and there's nothing but upside, we should at least.
Can we begin to pursue this, or if we can move forward?
I think it's no different than advertising with the market group. I mean, obviously there's no cost.
Yeah, I think you go 100.
Yeah, we don't have, until we go with that curriculum model, there's no signing of contracts, or it's just really a memorandum of understanding that.
And this is something you're going to try to get in place for the fall of this year, correct? Yeah. Okay.
Didn't I hear, I don't know if Walt mentioned, one of his updates that there was a bill going through that if the homeschool district was offering a cyber charter, they had to take that first.
There were some, yes, that legislation. I don't know, Mr. Shaheen, if you've heard any more about that.
There was some talk, but the biggest part was that they were looking to, right now the PISAs are being double accounted for. And
Cleaning up that funding formula.
That was the biggest portion of the bills that we're going through.
I think how it ties in, I think, regardless of what Harrisburg is doing, we should have our own program.
Correct.
If they're thinking along those lines.
That's our thinking.
Eventually, Harrisburg gets around to doing the right thing eventually, but it'd be nice to have ours in place already.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other discussion on this? Okay, seeing none. Any new business?
Do you want public comment on the old business?
We'll get to presentations by the public on issues in a
I
minute.
have new business for that. Well, not new business, technical business. But I'd like to bring up the transparency initiative that Mr. Basil discussed at the last meeting. I've seen it on the website. It is up there. I would ask, however, that it be moved. The link is great. I think it's a great thing to get doing. And I'm glad to see there's good movement on it. However, if it could be relocated, the link from the side up to the main panel, that's where it was intended to be. I think that would be great.
We're on the main panel.
I'd like to see it I'd like to see a transparency tab, and we're going to have a lot of information.
I don't know if you want a transparency.
I think transparency would be best. I think that was a
you're just looking at a very tight menu.
I think they could figure it out. I mean, if they could shrink things together, maybe move the search bar. I think they should be able to figure it out. But I think it's a good thing for the district to do.
Oh, I think it's a great thing for the district to do. I'm trying to think which website I was at. I was looking at a couple of the school district websites, and I noted one or two of them had I forget what they called it. I should have figured that. I should have taken a closer note of it. But they had a separate tab amongst their main tabs that was just for public information.
Actually, right to know tab.
Yeah.
That would be an option. I think transparency, I think I think the word does matter. Of course, the information matters, but the transparency is a strong word. I mean, it sends a message to the world of what we're talking about and our information.
The only thing you and I know what transparency means, but somebody else coming to the website may not understand what is that. If I'm looking for public documents, why is it transparent?
Public documents.
You think public documents? I don't know. I think records. We're arguing over semantics now, but
I agree. Make it easier to find. Yeah. And call it what needs to be called.
Well, I think our IT department can probably surf a couple different websites, see what's out there.
No, they've done a good job.
If there's a standard being used, standard nomenclature being used, then we'd want to adopt.
They're here tonight. They're hearing the conversation.
I'll look at Mr. Basil if he has links for his favorite websites. If he could forward out the links, and I'd be happy to search the other districts in the Commonwealth, and I'll send a list to IT. We can find a standard that's going to use it. We can go from there. I'd be happy to do that.
I think Twin Valley was one I saw. Maybe O&J. I can't remember now. But okay. Any other new business?
Any update to share with us with the Blazer Foundation? What they're up to?
I haven't been.
They're having a meeting Thursday night. I'll be there.
Thursday, right?
They are planning. I know we just mailed out there's an event scheduled for May 30th where they're introducing Mrs. Conlon. So that's what's on the immediate horizon. I know the tax-exempt papers have been rectified and submitted, so if they get walked to the proper office quickly, we may get a quick turnaround on that. Just in my, I have, I'm glad you asked this, Mr. Shermanar. I actually have instituted a monthly standing meeting with the executive director, superintendent executive director meeting, so we can stay informed, and I can offer her, you know, some of the things that are going on with the district, and she can share with me what's going on. So we did have a meeting late April, I think was our first meeting, and we'll be meeting monthly. So outside of that, really not much more to report.
Since this is still fairly new and we all have a sort of a vested interest in it, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing it on the agenda at every committee meeting, committee of the whole meeting, just to hear. It could be just 2 minutes, but just,
sure,
just to hear what's going on.
I can make it a regular part of my superintendent's report.
I think Mrs. Conlon actually suggested coming to meetings. I think I suggested she show up at the voting meeting, just because that's when we have all of our other reporting coming out from the different
either meeting. I just thought it would be nice to keep it on the calendar, keep it on the agenda.
That is an interesting point, Mr. Basil. Maybe it would be prudent, for all those reports, maybe if we move them to the committee of the whole, because committee of the whole is more of a discussion meeting, and we may like to discuss the reports. I don't know. I just came to me, but if not. I mean, if we got discussion,
take a stand, yes or no?
I think that might be a different thing to think about.
We've talked about that for meetings in the past. Just ends up staying where it is. It's always been there,
it really depends after their meeting. Maybe she has something she wants to bring forth, and that might be towards the voting meeting versus the committee meeting.
I think the advantage of having these discussions at the committee of the whole, or I'm sorry, the voting meeting is it typically takes place later in the month, and committees have had an opportunity to meet and actually do something.
I think it's the only committee that meets prior to this is the curriculum committee, if I'm not mistaken.
Sometimes policy depends on the calendar.
And looking at BCIU, I don't think until after committee of the whole typically. I thought I'd bring it up though.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from board members? New items? Okay. Moving on to presentations by public on issues. If you have something you'd like to address the board with, please step up to their microphone, state your name, your address. You have 3 minutes.
I'm Tina Jolivet, 313 Woodbridge Lane. When you all were discussing the cyber charter schools, I have an issue on that. When I think about how the kids are ranked in this school district, which I think is wrong, the way that you all do it, well, where I'm from, what they typically do is if you take 3 or more honors classes and you graduate with a 3.5, you get the honor of sitting in the first 2 rows of graduation. That's just for the top honor students. But what you have done is you said, I don't care if you're in 1 honors class or 4 honors classes, I'm going to rank you. You got this 5-point scale difference, but you all get ranked the same. And they all, just come out as is. Well, the issue I have with that is my daughter who took 4 last year, she's taking 3 this year, she's in class with people who took 1. If they took 1, they are ranked higher than her, which is unfair because at graduation she should have the honor of being ahead of them because she has done all the work. Now, there was a child who went to a cyber school, and my daughter wanted the honor of sitting out for a whole year and working on a computer, not getting up and going to school and sitting in a classroom with a teacher, having late nights, and I can say this, I love Mrs. Bittler, but let me tell you, she worked my daughter last year, and it paid off because she placed advanced on her keystones. But she had late nights and packets that was like this. And then to see kids that come back into the school district, I know you want them back. They should not come in and outrank kids who've been here 3 and 4 years, who've done the work. Yet, so you have to be careful about that because you're going to have kids that are going to be 1, 2, and 3 who've been sitting at home for 1 or 2 years, and we're going to say, who are they? We haven't seen these kids, but they showed up their senior year. That's my concern because I know of kids who came back and they're outranking been here and done the work. That's what I'm concerned about. When you want these kids coming back in, and I understand that, but I'm looking at the kids who've been here and have met all the requirements from teachers and had the late nights. So I just want you to think about that.
Rich Martinez, 225 West Coast Drive. I've got 4 or 5 comments about your budget discussion. First of all, you talked about the psychologist and you talked about efficiencies you put in 3 years ago. If I'm not mistaken, hasn't your student population declined about 10% since 3 years ago?
Yes.
And that should impact how many people you need. Plus, I was at the curriculum meeting with Mr. Shaheen, chair, and that presentation by the counselor seems to be some duplication of effort or some duplication of justification for the guidance counselor as well as the psychologist. I think that needs to be looked at. I don't think we need all these people, and it's only a matter of deciding which one gets eliminated. Frankly, I have to tell all of you, it's very disconcerting. I agree with Mr. Sermonero. Back in the fall, you talked about starting the budget process, so you didn't come up to the last minute having these discussions. And here you are tonight, a week before you have to vote on the final budget, and you're rehashing everything you talked about back in the fall with all these programs, and it just seems like we don't make decisions. We keep pushing it off to meeting after meeting, and now we're up against the deadline, and I don't know that we're going to make the right decisions. Activity fees, you've been talking about that since last fall, and now you've got a final proposed budget. You still haven't decided the definitions of the activity fees, what the tiers are, let alone the money that's coming in, so you can't count that into your revenue yet. And you're going to do it next week. It's disconcerting, Dr. Crowder. You made a presentation 3 months ago. You said you were saving $600,000 if you closed the APC. Tonight, all of a sudden, it's $300,000 and $300,000 went someplace else. But we don't have a paper in front of us showing us where to go with $300,000 went. And that seems to be another problem with this board, is the numbers keep being revised, and yet we don't know where they're going. And the last thing I want to add is the fund balance. If I understand correctly, your projected fund balance after balancing this budget is $3.2 billion. So you're going to raise our taxes again. You're going to reach your hands into our wallets and take our money while you have $3 billion that you're sitting on because next year you may need it. And we hear that every year. Oh my God, we're going to deplete the fund balance. And every year the fund balance isn't depleted. And I think you need to look at not always saying, oh, well, we'll just raise taxes just a little bit this year. And you're taking money that I don't think we need. I don't think you need to take our $600,000 when you're sitting on 1/3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hannah Tyler, 52 Warner. I just want to say that I respect everyone here on the board very much, as well as the administrators. I think that there is a definite disconnect as far as what's actually going on in your classroom as a concerned parent who has volunteered in the classroom. The fact that you're thinking about cutting basic skills, and I know that we are having issues, and it's very hard decisions. And when the administrators say this, that we can do this and we can still be a functional school district, I don't think that they're really somehow understanding what's going on in that classroom. I have been in a classroom where I have pulled out kids to help them with their basic skills. And the reason why I need to do that is because we've had to cut all the aids, which were other cuts that we did. Okay, and now these kids had me teaching them how to do this, while the teachers are trying to get all the kids who are at multiple levels in the classroom to all learn the same stuff. And if you cut that particular program, every child is supposed to have a fair and equitable education under the public school system. And unfortunately, my daughter, who does not struggle, is the one who, even without these cuts, is helping her fellow classmates. So she's not getting the fair and equitable education, and these poor kids that are going to fall through the cracks even more are not going to get that fair and equitable education. You have a surplus right now. And I know these are really hard, and you're probably looking at me and you're like, Hannah, you know the situation, why are you doing this? But I just got to say that this is something that it's very disconcerting. I think that the board doesn't always get the best view of what's going on actually in the classroom, because quite frankly, a lot of people are afraid of losing their jobs. So I just really want the board to really consider that, because I've been in these classrooms and I see what's going on, and I do believe that those teachers really need to step.
Thank you.
Laurel Reno, 367 Buckhead. I just wanted to make sure I have this right. I realize the fund balance is a very fluid thing that changes from the beginning of the year to the middle to now. However, a few months ago, the board thought there was roughly $3 million in the fund balance, and they were willing to pull the money out to save extracurricular activities in kindergarten. You've pulled that out. You're bringing in an estimated surplus now, not a 3.5 fund balance, but you're estimating it to be 4.4. So even though you've taken money out for this kindergarten and the extracurriculars, you're still hovering at $3 million in your fund balance. Based on the preliminary budget that's out there on the website, you estimated at 3.5. So you've only used about $500,000 of what you estimated you were going to have. Yes, this is fluid, but 2 months ago, it was less than what you're projecting it to be, and you were willing to pull money out to save various programs. I don't know what programs need to be saved on here. I wouldn't want to have to make those decisions. I can say, yes, Mrs. Hamill, your child is struggling in math, you're going to hire a tutor. Everybody in this room is going to hire a tutor. We're all sitting here until 10 o'clock at night because we care about the education. There are many parents who don't look in their children's backpacks, who don't sit at the table and do homework with their children. Who's going to help them if they're in a classroom of 25 to 28 students and they need that extra help? Their parents might not hire them a tutor. So it's falling upon our job to make sure those students don't struggle, because what will happen on your PSSAs? When will you get that? And if you decide that you're going to have to bring these things back, what cost is it going to be, and how long is it going to take you to make a decision? We've sat here for months talking about the same things, and you haven't made a decision. So what happens if in December of next year we find out our students are doing poorly on the core sites, or the PSSAs were not prepared because we've eliminated basic skills, or the school psychologist, or business ed, whatever it may be? It'll be too late to bring those things back next school year. So you have to think about the fund balance, that the money is there. I'm okay with you raising my taxes to 0.66 mils. I'm actually okay with you raising a little bit more, because my children are worth it. And on a side note, Mr. McCullough, will you please use a microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
I apologize.
I don't know if you don't like it, but it's very hard to hear your voice.
My apologies. Speak loud.
Also, the poor woman who wanted to speak left an hour ago because she thought it was 45 minutes or 45 seconds. She had something she wanted you guys to have.
Can you take that, Mr. Sheen?
I think just for the record, so we put in the record, it is a letter concerning the elimination of the music program.
I'd like to just do a follow-up statement quickly about the microphone situation. If we could have the microphones available at our next meeting, I think that would be good, because the public has the right to know what we're talking about.
Okay. Go ahead.
Joe Corey, 103 Trinity Drive. I just want to make sure I understand the numbers as they currently stand. You mentioned 51,286 in revenue, 52,744 expense, 1458 being the difference there. As part of the expense number, does that include the taking out of all the curtailments? So that that's what that's that. APC, that's not factored in at all yet. Is that true or not?
We just talked about that this evening. So as it currently stands, we have $52,744,202 in expenses. That number could theoretically be reduced by $298,000.
I'm not sure why isn't it 600? I understand that we shall gain the money from one bucket to another, but if you're going to do that, then curtailments are worth more money, so to speak, and cut. So therefore, there really should be 600,000 total off. And that's really part of my question.
I'm not sure I understand what your question is, actually. Can you say it again?
We're off 1458. My question is how much of APC has been factored into the savings of APC? And you just said it's 290, and that's because, and frankly, it was disconcerting that we start the meeting with, okay, any public comments? Of course, I didn't say anything because I didn't realize we were going to change the numbers. Had I realized that, I would have been up here at the very beginning. But that aside, I'm thinking that the real deficit is, if you will, is 858. Because the 600 from APC, if you move the 300 out into the encores, into the curtailments, then the curtailments are worth now more money than they were all along.
I think they did go up, though. I think we were at 1.4.
We started off the year at 1.4 when they first originally presented the budget to us in December. It went as high as 1.7, then up as high as $1.9 million of fund balance use. Okay, since that 1.9 number was generated in February, and we were kicking around this number of 600,000 and change for APC, that number has since gone down to 1.45 something, not including the $300,000 of APC. So you went from 1.9 down to 1.4 with some adjustments.
1.9, they were at 1.4 something several months ago.
And the way you got that was because you moved the APC money into, because I must have missed that, and I missed one meeting, so it could have been that, I suppose. But I don't recall a discussion of, hey, we're going to, because of all of the said all along was, hey, we can't talk about APC because we're going to wait until May 6th until that becomes.
Well, you have to understand the closing of APC was not primarily financial in nature. It was due to a declining enrollment.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I'm
So.
not arguing which bucket you put in. I'm just saying, according to the figures I've been kind of tracking all the way through, I'm thinking the difference is 800.
Well, I think a lot of the numbers were consistent. So we were talking about an administrator, which I believe was the principal. We were talking about a nurse, and the actual dollar figures of those numbers changed a little bit, but those positions are the same. 2 secretaries. Operation and maintenance is the same.
Custodian.
We lost a custodian, but I think that changed because what?
He needs to replace that person.
He needs to replace the person. So that overall net number changed from, I've got it here somewhere.
But Mr. Basil, I just told you, there was money taken out of what was earmarked as APC savings and moved into another, that's curtailments. And when that move took place, are you saying that when that move took place, we lowered the amount of deficit then because we're not
yes.
That as part of whether we close APC or not? And if that's the case, then that's part of the math that I'm not trending through.
That when we originally started, and again, I'm going to ballpark the number here, which is going to have the suspense on us a little bit. Several months ago, when we got that first list of curtailments that we put off the side, that number was $1.41 million. And I had the sheet that you provided. And what they did is, I believe, they moved APC, because that's down 1.9, okay? And APC number went down by almost a similar amount. Okay.
So you're saying we would have been $1.8 million had we not made the move, but now we're $1.4 million ballpark. Right? Had we not reclassified the ATC savings
That's correct.
to the other, the deficit would have been higher. So now what we're talking about is 1458 minus 290. So we're looking at $1,168,000. Okay. My next thing, and kind of ties to that, is going through the curtailments. What I'd like to understand is for each one, which ones of these are because of declining enrollment? Which in my view means we should make those moves. Even if we have a bazillion dollar surplus, if we have declining enrollment, then we should have the right number of kids and teachers, etc. And what are the ones that are on the curtailment list? Are because, you know what, we need to make cuts, and so we're making tough choices in our program. The elimination of, obviously, the bucket of money that was moved into curtailment states from APC is obviously one that should stay regardless of what discussion takes place. I'd like to understand each of these curtailments, which ones are the result of a declining enrollment. And I know there are others.
I think my understanding is most of these are the elementary teachers, correct?
Actually, the way Mr. Subers wrote the resolution, they could be carried either under decline in enrollment or curtailment. So that was to ensure that if there was a challenge to it, that the district would be able to face that challenge either under. There's two provisions by which you can curtail staff: either substantial decrease in pupil enrollment, which the resolution clearly indicates, and we can do it as an alteration and curtailment of educational programming. The way Mr. Subers structured it is they would be able to go under both provisions.
And I understand that, regardless of that.
Right. That's just a legal explanation to try to answer your question.
I think overall, my understanding of it, to answer your question, is in addition to the APC, you had another 3.5 full-time elementary teachers that would have left due to declining enrollment.
What about middle school?
Huh?
Did you cut out for middle school? Or because we reduced one of the teams?
I believe that's...
No, that's the elementary.
You're talking about the 4 middle school core subject positions as defined? Those are the encore? Oh, that's math, English, social studies, and science. That's these right here. I believe that's more curtailment. I'm sorry?
Is that right? That's one because of enrollment doesn't dictate.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, sir.
I said, is that because the middle school core, I thought, was we reduced the number of teams because the enrollment dictated that we didn't need as many teams?
I can't say specifically if that's what that's for. I think there's a combination of things going on in here.
Yes, that's the way Mr. Subers has presented it. It can be under both.
I don't think
that's not his question. From a legal perspective, he's not asking how they're being presented. He's asking, I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, what you're saying is, if there weren't the curtailments and we were just making adjustments based on enrollment, what would those numbers be? Is that what you're asking? Okay, that's what I thought. My understanding was we'd probably lose about 4.5 positions or 5 positions or FTEs just due to declining enrollment alone. That was my recollection from previous discussions. I can't identify in this mix which ones those positions would be.
Well, you could say that the motions of the encores probably not because of declining enrollment. The psychologist and the basic skills are not because of declining enrollment.
Band isn't.
The band isn't.
Well, I mean...
But I was thinking the 3 elementary positions, yes. The 4 middle school core, I thought, yes. So, and then the encore, the other APC reduction, which is like 366,000. So I can kind of bring a total 884 between those 3 that seem like they're because of declining enrollment. And the other roughly $1 million would be maybe 1.3. I was trying to get a framework in my mind where I do want to throw a commentary on the basic skills. I mean, Hannah spoke eloquently about it. I can tell you my daughter, I'm a math guy. I was across the street in math college, right, through the basic skills program. She's in the top 15% of her class now. She's going to be junior next year. Without that help, I don't think she would have gotten there. And so, she doesn't have an IEP or that kind of stuff, but she needs that help, that critical point in time in her, learning. And, I wish I could see, someone else's kid have that opportunity. Lastly, in terms of bridging the gap, I think, we talked about the taxes, we go from exceptions, eliminate the tax increase that we put in, whatever, bringing back some of these programs that were curtailed, and I'd like to see some of them at least brought back. The fact that we were going to throw a surplus this year, or we thought we were going to dig into the fund balance last year, and Mr. Sheehy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've thrown a fund surplus pretty much every year since I've been coming to the meeting. Just to say the last 5-6 years, despite the projections that say we're not going to throw a surplus. So I'm not really too concerned about your proposed, call it $800,000 deficit that we need to dig into the surplus or $1 million into whatever number it is. Because you never write any other year. So something's wrong in the budgeting process, the forecasting process, or maybe not. It's just that's the way things tend to work out. Nonetheless, to say that we're going to cut these programs that are vital to kids, the community, our house values, all that kind of stuff, because we might run a deficit that we say we're going to do every year but never end up doing. That'll take some explaining.
Well, I think, sir, I hate to cut you short, but we're at 3 minutes. I think you heard this board express that very concern. Some of us have a hard time raising taxes when we're throwing surpluses. Others have a hard time cutting programs when we're throwing surpluses. We recognize that. So the issue for us as a board is to do the best we can with the information we have available and the model that we're working with to determine what our costs are going to be for next year, and also try to project what they're going to be the following year and the year after that, and make sure we do have some money in reserve, because what we don't want to do is, we've been throwing surpluses, so let's spend fund balance down to zero or down to some number that we're, on the borderline of being comfortable with, and then find out that we've spent more than what we anticipated for whatever the reason. I don't know what it could be. I know for the last 3 or 4 years we've been trying to do our best to drill down on what the variances are and why we keep throwing the variances that we have. And there have been some outliers. PlanCon J money coming in 1 year, something else another, stimulus money another year that we didn't know what the amounts were going to be, and all of a sudden here it is, and now we're accounting for it. That kind of stuff happens. But on the other hand, we got to figure out where the variance is coming from. Why this year are we throwing a surplus when we projected to spend $1.3 million? I don't know the answer to that question. We're still trying to figure that out.
If you go by next year's projected numbers, you're looking at $1.2 million call it shortfall after the plus you raise the taxes $600. You like the shooting for you. So
look, I don't think you're hearing any objection from the board. We've got people here who you've heard the discussion. I think I said it 7 times while we sat here. This is an issue of fund balance. How much fund balance are we going to spend to either bring back program or reduce taxes or both? And that's a number that somehow this board, as 9, has got to be comfortable with, because there's going to be a remainder, and that remainder is going to have to get us through not only next year but the year after. And we're trying to figure that out. So, I take umbrage with the notion that there's a shell game going on here, or that somehow we're manipulating numbers or any of that kind of stuff. We try to be very transparent with our discussion about the budget. We have these discussions in workshops. We've had them in finance committee meetings. We've done our best to share those numbers with the public to the best of our ability. Whenever somebody gets up here and asks us a question, we sit here and try to figure out how to best answer your question and give you all the information that we have that we can legally share with you. We want to share it with you. So I don't want people to walk away from this meeting thinking that somehow things are changing behind the scenes, because they're not. We go from one update to the next, from 1 month to the next, and things change. There's teachers who take classes, and they They get paid more money as a result of that, and that changes the dynamics of our numbers. It changes the bumping schedule for those who are going to get furloughed and demoted, and that changes the numbers that we have represented on here. I've got like 5 different iterations on a spreadsheet that I'm looking at, and every month we go through and we look at the numbers to understand how they've changed from one week to the next, and it's a moving target, to say the least. We got more money from transportation reimbursement from the state that we didn't anticipate. That wasn't even on the radar back in January. Came in $250,000.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand, and I do understand all that. What I was referring to was the moving of the APC without any discussion prior to this. That was what I was referring to.
Well,
so I apologize. And you are very forthcoming and all that.
I mean, understand that in terms of APC, legally, we couldn't talk about that for 3 months.
That's why I didn't understand how the numbers changed, because you weren't able to talk about it legally, and all of a sudden the numbers changed. And the part that there was no public comment. The comment was before that, and they changed the equation, there was no comment. Although I have time to raise the issue. That was all I was referring to. That's perhaps the wrong choice of words. You know, and let's not forget the teacher's contract, which I know there are still negotiations. And, you know, so that's another factor.
I'm going to have to...
As you go to a budget on Monday night, none of these things are resolved, and you're going to vote on a final budget that isn't final, but you're going to come up with something. I just don't know when these things become final to someone.
Well, they become final June 24th is when they become final.
Well, what's going to happen? Stop. Thank you.
Yep. Hannah, I got to follow procedure here. We already gave you 3 minutes in this part of the public comment period.
Oh, I think you're going to give you to ask another question.
Why don't you see me after the meeting, and I'll do what I can to answer for you. Okay.
Shane Connell, 30 Bangertown Road. I want to say something on behalf of Dr. Otto, and I'm incorrect. He can correct what I'm going to say. These cuts that are brought to the table are cuts only financially. At no time did he say that these are guaranteed that will work. He didn't say, you know, this is the best thing for our school. He was given a job, which was to balance the budget and legally meet the state criteria. At no time did he say, you know, cutting music and art and gym and your middle school classes is the best thing for our school. So to hold him liable for something that the school district can meet the state's requirements by making these cuts. It's not the best thing. He's not saying it's the best thing. He's saying legally we can do it. I'm not guaranteeing you. He even said it again tonight. There's a risk. Lawsuits can start coming in. Kids can start, test scores can start plummeting. There's a lot of risk when you're looking at these cuts. Mr. Kurtz said, you know, this is what Dr. Otto said that we can do. And he's saying that you can do it. It's going to legally pass the state guidelines, but he's not saying this is going to work or this is the best thing. He said, you gave him a job to zero out the budget. These are cuts that we can make and still meet the state guidelines. Now, am I correct with this, Dr. Otto?
Without getting into a long-winded answer, I wouldn't dispute what you said to a certain degree.
Okay. And that's all I would like to bring up because, you know, when you come Monday to pass this, and 2 years, 3 years down the road, all this stuff starts hitting the fan, if it would end up going that way. And then the school board said, well, the administration said this would be no problem. That's not what he's saying.
Shane, I do want to, I don't know whether I should thank you for that comment or not, but I think I'm reflecting the sentiment of the board. I don't think anyone on the board has felt that any of these things are things that they want to do either. So I think that's important. I mean, you've heard the passion of the different board members tonight on both sides of the tax issue versus the program issue. And it's a difficult struggle for me as superintendent as well, because my primary role is to deliver a great educational program. And I will try to do that the best I can with what I have given to me as the tools to do that. So, but you can't ignore the financial side of this discussion either, which is I kind of think what you're saying. So I had said, and you are correct, I've said that from day one, and I repeated it again tonight. But we have a problem to solve, and there are many ways to get that problem solved, and I think that's what you see all of us struggling with as we try to get to that end game, balanced budget.
Right, and I've heard it, but I'm kind of sitting out here in the audience getting mixed signals that there's some of the board members who are saying, hey, this is what the administration is saying, this is what's coming back to us. You know, that this is a solution that will work. And I don't think at any point of any of these conversations did the administration say this was guaranteed work. We have teachers sitting in the teachers' lounge just hanging out and start, cutting back. I think this is strictly being done by a financial situation. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I understand completely from a financial point of view why you would want to cut, the school psychologist when, how do you know if it can't work unless you try it? However, when we're talking about maybe you'll know if by October or November or December if it's not going to work, and then you can work to bring it back. Those children, though, are going to be 1/3 of the year into their school year, and they're learning where, oops, we made a mistake, and they're the ones that are suffering. Those children then aren't getting identified in time. It is taking too long. The ones that already are identified aren't getting what they need because you're trying to spread it too thin. So even though you want to find out if you can do it or not, it's really not, I don't think, in the best interest of the kids to play, well, let's see if we can do it or not, when you're talking about a good 1/3 of their year that you are playing with.
Just to dovetail off that comment, not only if you become a school psychologist is a child left floundering or any children left floundering, but you're setting yourselves up at risk for litigation, which I'm sure most of you are aware. You don't meet the needs of an IEP within a certain deadline. The wait-and-see approach might come back to bite you in the form of a lawsuit, which you won't win. And as far as I understand right now, we have 3 school psychologists, and we contract out 1. Because the 3 aren't able to do the job as necessary.
That's not true.
We did say that the enrollment was declining with students. Is our special ed population declining?
Our special ed population has remained consistent as a percentage of our overall population, so I would answer yes.
Dr. Carter, do we contract out additional?
Mrs. Torsha, I haven't.
That would be for Mrs. Mikowski to answer. I don't know this is special education.
I'll have to get back to you, and that's unbeknownst to me. I haven't heard that.
While I'm up here, I'm just going to comment. There was a comment earlier about many of these expenses, trying to eliminate undesirable expenses. I would like to posture that none of these are undesirable expenses. These are children. And while we have an opportunity as teachers to maybe ride out a difficult economic storm, children only have one opportunity to go to kindergarten. We only have one opportunity to go to high school. And the damage that we do to them could be irreparable. So please consider that for you.
I don't understand how a rise in PSERS rates are not affect children. That was my target for that comment. The Peaser's rate's going up at the rates they're going up. How does that translate to helping the child? How does a retirement account help a child?
Who are you holding accountable for the Peaser's expenses? That was not a mismanagement of our funds. Teachers have always paid into that fund.
I don't.
Tell me where my comment
We
came
have
from.
no control over that.
No, all we're saying is, I think what Mr. Sermonero's point is that remember what the drivers, I think everybody has to be reminded what the drivers of our budget deficit are. It's salaries and benefits, right? We're all in agreement that salaries and benefits are driving our budget deficits. Okay? So if we're all in agreement that that's what's happening, well, part of that is Peasers, and part of that is the contract that we have with the teachers. Okay? Those are the two key drivers of our budget, 70% of our budget. So how do we address that?
Well,
and so, wait a minute.
We've been trying to address that for 8 weeks ago.
Okay, we're not going to get into that discussion here now because it's not the appropriate place for it.
I didn't think so either, but you discussed.
No, we didn't. No, we did not bring that up. Okay? We were sitting here listening to comments. And to sit here and intonate that this board is cutting program and we find that desirable, I think is...
I'm quoting somebody else who's having said that. It's not my words.
I don't know who you're quoting up here. I never said it was desirable.
We have to find out what is the undesirable expenses and eliminate them.
The least desirable, I would say. We're all up here with bad choices, okay? If we had enough money to pay for everything here, we keep everything here. We don't have enough money for that. And if we're looking out 1, 2, 3 years, I'm looking at salaries and benefits moving at $3 million or more. We don't even have that much money in our fund balance. So, we got to cut program. We'll be talking about it.
Good evening. Steve Miller, 600 Ridge Drive. Just wondering if you could tell me if there's any news on teacher negotiations, contract negotiations.
I think you just got the tail end of that. There have been negotiations going on for the last few weeks, and this board will be discussing those negotiations after this meeting ends. Any other comments?
Second.
Meeting's adjourned.
Frank, Andrew, don't leave.